Right now, somewhere in the depths of space, advanced beings might be watching your every move. They've been observing humanity for millennia, taking notes, measuring responses, calculating results. You are living inside the most elaborate examination ever conceived, and you don't even know it. This isn't science fiction or fantasy. This could be your reality at this very moment. Welcome to Just About Earth, where we dive deep into questions that reshape everything you thought you knew about existence. I'm here to guide you through concepts that will fundamentally alter your perspective on life itself. Today we're exploring a possibility so profound that once it enters your consciousness, you'll never see the world the same way again. What if our entire planet functions as a massive testing facility? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but as an actual experimental environment designed by intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Every challenge you face, every relationship you build, every decision you make, needs all of it carefully orchestrated to measure something about you, about us, about what we become when nobody tells us the rules. Before we journey deeper into this mind-bending concept, I'm curious about your current location. Are you experiencing daylight streaming through windows, or has darkness settled around you? Whether you're beginning your morning or winding down from the day, we're sharing this moment across time zones and continents. Your presence here creates a connection that spans whatever distance separates us physically. If you enjoy these thought-provoking explorations, if you appreciate content that challenges conventional thinking, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing. This helps our community grow and brings these conversations to others seeking meaningful content to accompany their quiet moments. Now let's examine this extraordinary possibility with the attention it deserves. The concept of Earth functioning as a testing ground isn't about rushing toward conclusions. Instead, it's about allowing this idea to settle into your awareness and observing how it transforms your understanding of everyday experiences. Consider the word examination itself. Your school memories might conjure images of sterile classrooms, ticking clocks, and nervous students filling bubbles on answer sheets. But life's true assessments operate differently. They evaluate your character when pressure mounts, your choices when nobody's watching, your growth when you don't realize you're learning. If Earth serves as humanity's testing environment, each individual might face a customized version designed specifically for their development. Your trials aren't identical to anyone else's because the examination measures different aspects of human potential in each person. Think about the remarkable conditions that allow life to flourish here. Our planet occupies the precise distance from the sun where water remains liquid. The atmosphere contains exactly the right mixture of gases to sustain complex organisms. Earth's magnetic field creates an invisible shield protecting us from deadly cosmic radiation. The moon stabilizes our rotation, creating predictable seasons that allow life to plan and adapt. Scientists call this the habitable zone of mind, that narrow band around a star where conditions support life as we understand it. But what if these perfect circumstances weren't accidental? What if they represent carefully calibrated settings, chosen deliberately to create optimal testing conditions? This raises fascinating questions about the nature of the examination itself. What aspects of humanity are being evaluated? Perhaps it's our survival instincts, how we respond to natural disasters, pandemics, climate changes, and resource scarcity. Maybe it's our moral development, whether we choose compassion over cruelty when faced with difficult situations. Could the test focus on cooperation, our ability to unite despite different languages, cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds? Or might it measure something entirely unexpected, some quality we haven't even identified yet, but which determines our species' ultimate destiny? If we're truly being observed, the watchers would need to remain hidden to gather authentic data. Obvious interference would contaminate the results. Instead, any guidance might appear as coincidence, perturbed chance encounter that changes someone's life path, a series of events that prevents disaster, an opportunity that appears at precisely the right moment. You've probably experienced moments that felt strangely orchestrated, times when circumstances aligned too perfectly to seem random, when exactly the right person entered your life when you needed them most, when seemingly unrelated events created patterns that guided you toward important realizations. We typically dismiss these experiences as coincidence, but if Earth functions as a testing facility, they might represent subtle interventions, potential variables in a vast experiment studying human behavior and development. This concept isn't entirely revolutionary. Throughout history, cultures worldwide have viewed life as a trial or examination. Ancient philosophies and religious traditions often describe existence as a period of testing, where our choices determine our ultimate fate. What makes this modern interpretation different is the possibility that our examiners might not be divine beings or spiritual forces, but advanced intelligences using scientific methods to study us. They could be extraterrestrial civilizations so technologically superior that we cannot detect their presence, or perhaps future versions of humanity itself, reaching back through time or dimensions to observe their own ancestors. The implications are staggering. If we're being tested, every moment carries significance beyond what we imagine. Your kindness to a stranger, your resilience during hardship, your choices when faced with moral dilemma. More so of it might be recorded, analyzed, and evaluated by minds we cannot comprehend. This doesn't necessarily mean we're judged by human standards of right and wrong. The criteria might be entirely alien to our way of thinking. What we consider virtuous behavior might be irrelevant to the actual test. What we see as failures might represent exactly the responses the examiners hope to observe. The beauty of this possibility lies not in finding definitive answers, but in how it changes your relationship with existence itself. When you consider that every experience might serve a purpose beyond your understanding, life takes on new meaning. Your struggles aren't random suffering. They're opportunities to demonstrate qualities that matter in ways you never imagined. Whether this idea represents truth or simply a fascinating thought experiment, it offers a powerful lens for viewing your daily experiences. What would change in your behavior if you knew someone was watching, measuring, evaluating your responses to life's endless variety of situations? We're just beginning to explore this profound possibility. The questions multiply the deeper we venture into this concept, and each answer reveals new mysteries waiting to be examined. Different spiritual traditions frame existence as a classroom where souls encounter lessons impossible to learn elsewhere. Ancient wisdom speaks of journeys designed to forge character through hardship and triumph. While the specifics differ across cultures and centuries, one theme emerges consistently: human existence serves purposes that extend far beyond mere survival. Viewing Earth as an examination facility isn't creating something new or myth, it's examining age-old wisdom through a contemporary lens. This perspective offers both comfort and unease to those who encounter it. For some, the testing hypothesis provides meaning to suffering. Pain transforms from random cruelty into purposeful challenge. Difficulties become stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. Loss carries hidden lessons. Setbacks reveal strength you never knew existed. When hardship serves a greater design, enduring it becomes bearable, even meaningful. Others find this concept deeply troubling. Constant evaluation suggests perpetual judgment. Unknown consequences lurk behind every choice. The pressure of being assessed without understanding the criteria creates anxiety about making wrong decisions. The possibility that unseen observers catalogue every action feels invasive and overwhelming. Regardless of emotional response, this framework fundamentally alters perception of daily existence. Acts of spontaneous kindness gain new significance. Ethical choices made in private moments carry weight beyond immediate consequences. Your response to adversity becomes data in some vast database of human behavior. Consider another possibility. The examination might focus on collective rather than individual performance. Perhaps the evaluators care less about personal success and more about species-wide achievements. Can humanity develop sustainable civilization? Will technological advancement destroy us or elevate us? Can we resolve conflicts without destroying ourselves in the process? From this perspective, each generation represents another phase of data collection. Every era contributes observations to an ongoing study spanning millennia. Individual lives become variables in equations measuring humanity's progress toward unknown objectives. Historical patterns begin looking like experimental phases when viewed through this lens. Civilizations rise and fall with suspicious regularity. Periods of enlightenment alternate with dark ages. Scientific breakthroughs emerge simultaneously across different cultures. Wars erupt at crucial turning points. Peace arrives just when survival hangs in balance. These cycles might represent controlled conditions in a vast experiment studying human development over geological timescales. Each phase tests different aspects of our nature, creativity, under pressure, cooperation during crisis, wisdom when wielding power, resilience after devastating failure. Humans already employ similar testing methods in smaller contexts, create challenges to push beyond comfort zones. Military training simulates combat conditions. Academic competitions measure intellectual capacity. Athletic events test physical limits. Psychological studies observe behavior under stress. If we design tests to understand ourselves better, why couldn't superior intelligences be doing the same thing to us on a planetary scale? The methodology would be identical, just vastly expanded in scope and sophistication. This raises intriguing questions about evaluation criteria. Traditional testing measures right answers versus wrong ones. But if Earth functions as an examination facility, the grading system might emphasize process over results. How we approach challenges could matter more than whether we solve them correctly. Panic versus composure under pressure. Collaboration versus competition. When resources dwindle. Innovation versus stagnation when facing obstacles. Compassion versus selfishness when helping others costs us something valuable. The journey might be more important than the destination. Even contemplating whether Earth serves as a testing ground could be part of the examination itself. Some individuals might be meant to live entirely in the present moment, never questioning the larger framework. Others might be designed to wonder, to probe, to seek patterns behind apparent randomness. Your response to this very idea becomes another data point. Do you dismiss it immediately? Do you obsess over implications? Do you find balance between healthy skepticism and open-minded exploration? Each reaction reveals something about your character, your worldview, your capacity for abstract thinking. As we venture deeper into this possibility, we'll examine Earth's seemingly perfect conditions for supporting life. We'll investigate whether the challenges humanity faces might be more than coincidental obstacles. We'll explore how stories throughout history might all point toward the same extraordinary conclusion. When you truly absorb the possibility that Earth functions as a testing facility, your immediate environment transforms. That comfortable chair supporting you, the walls creating your personal space, background sounds filtering through your awareness, even air temperature against your skin, everything takes on new dimensions. Objects around you stop being random assemblages of matter and start resembling carefully placed props in an elaborate stage production. It's like suddenly noticing architectural details in a building you visited countless times. Nothing has changed externally, yet everything appears different because your perspective has shifted. This concept possesses unique staying power because it exists beyond proof or disproof. Once considered seriously, it creates a persistent filter through which all subsequent experiences pass. That frustrating daily commute transforms from mere inconvenience into patience training. Unexpected obstacles shift from bad luck into intentional challenges. People entering your life at precisely the right moment stop seeming coincidental and start appearing orchestrated. Humans naturally gravitate toward this type of thinking without conscious effort. We say everything happens for a reason when events align meaningfully. We speak of fate, destiny, and being meant to encounter certain individuals. Whether taken literally or metaphorically, these phrases reveal comfort with the idea that life contains more than random chance. If Earth truly serves as humanity's testing ground, those moments of perfect timing might be breadcrumbs, subtle indicators that deeper structures govern surface appearances. But the real impact of this question doesn't stem from the possibility of being tested. It emerges from recognizing what such a scenario would mean. If this represents an actual examination, then purpose underlies everything. Planetary conditions, beneficial and harmful, alike stop being cosmic accidents and become deliberate choices. Every natural disaster, disease outbreak, technological breakthrough, peaceful era, and violent conflict could serve specific functions in the overall assessment. At this point, mere curiosity transforms into something much weightier. This isn't paranoid fantasizing about hidden watchers monitoring your every move. Instead, it's expanding perspective until you can envision the entire planet as one interconnected system designed for specific purposes. The implications ripple outward in all directions. If true, nothing is truly random. Every experience serves some function in a grand design beyond human comprehension. Your smallest actions carry significance you never imagined. Your private thoughts might be more transparent than you assumed. Whether this represents literal truth or fascinating thought experiment, it provides a powerful framework for understanding existence differently. What would change in your choices if you knew every decision contributed to some cosmic evaluation of human potential? Imagine viewing our world from the vast emptiness beyond our atmosphere. Below you spreads a magnificent blue marble, decorated with swirling white clouds and brown-green landmasses. City lights twinkle like scattered diamonds across the darkened hemisphere. Weather systems dance in slow-motion spirals. Animal herds migrate across continents following ancient patterns. 7 billion human beings move through their individual narratives simultaneously. From this elevated perspective, Earth resembles a massive simulation running in real time. Every creature, every person, every decision contributes to an incredibly complex system operating at scales beyond individual comprehension. If some intelligence designed this scenario, they would observe the entire spectacle simultaneously, like watching countless chess games played on a board the size of a planet. This viewpoint immediately raises the crucial question: what objectives would drive such an elaborate experiment? If you possessed the capability to create and monitor this kind of testing environment, what would you hope to discover? Would you seek to identify the most adaptable specimens, the most ethically developed individuals, or those demonstrating superior intellectual capacity? Perhaps the evaluation focuses on collective achievement rather than individual performance measure, measuring whether the species as a whole can reach specific developmental milestones. The possibilities multiply endlessly. Moral evolution, technological advancement, environmental stewardship, conflict resolution, creative expression, spiritual awakening, any of these could represent the true criteria being measured. We might be completely wrong about what actually matters in this assessment. Traditional belief systems emphasized moral behavior as the primary evaluation standard. Ancient teachings suggested that existence tested your treatment of others, adherence to ethical principles, and capacity for compassion despite difficult circumstances. Success might unlock paradise, reincarnation into better conditions, or simply avoid punishment for failures. Contemporary speculation, particularly in scientific circles, considers broader possibilities. If extraterrestrial civilizations or temporally displaced humans serve as observers, their interests might transcend individual morality entirely. They could be measuring survival instincts, problem-solving abilities, innovative thinking, or capacity for planetary-scale cooperation. The most intriguing aspect of sophisticated testing involves hidden objectives. Often, participants believe they're being evaluated on one criterion, while the actual measurement focuses on something completely different. Military training exercises supposedly test combat skills but really assess leadership under pressure. Academic examinations appear to measure knowledge but actually evaluate thinking processes. Psychological studies claim to study one behavior while secretly observing another entirely. If Earth operates similarly, our assumptions about what matters most might be fundamentally incorrect. The achievements we celebrate, the values we prioritize, the goals we pursue could all be irrelevant distractions from whatever is actually being measured. Another critical consideration involves participant awareness. Should test subjects know they're being examined? Knowledge typically alters behavior. Some individuals try harder when monitored, others attempt to manipulate the system. This explains why hypothetical observers would maintain secrecy. Alternatively, awareness itself might be part of the assessment. How do beings respond when they suspect their reality contains deeper layers? Do they seek answers, attempt communication with their overseers, or ignore the implications entirely? The examination could operate on multiple levels simultaneously. Individual assessment might focus on personal character development, relationship management, and resilience during hardship. Species-level evaluation could measure collective problem-solving, environmental responsibility, and potential for expansion beyond Earth. If both scales matter, the complexity becomes staggering, individual choices rippling outward to influence humanity's overall performance. Historical patterns provide abundant data for such multi-layered analysis. Civilizations emerge, flourish, innovate, then collapse with remarkable consistency. New societies rise from the ashes, sometimes learning from predecessors, sometimes repeating identical mistakes. Technological breakthroughs transform existence while creating unprecedented dangers. Cooperation alternates with competition in endless cycles that shape our collective future. This messy, contradictory, unpredictable process would generate fascinating results for any intelligence studying human development. The combination of individual agency and collective consequence creates scenarios impossible to predict or control completely. However, if Earth truly functions as an examination facility, it's not necessarily designed for participant safety or comfort. Effective tests push subjects beyond their limits. They include time pressures, unexpected obstacles, and consequences for poor performance. They might eliminate participants who fail to meet standards. None of this would seem fair to those experiencing it without understanding the larger context. Fairness might not be the objective. His is. The goal could be observing authentic responses under precisely these challenging conditions. When subjects don't know they're being tested, can't predict what comes next, and must navigate obstacles without knowing the rules. Yet this scenario isn't entirely pessimistic. If the assessment measures growth, creativity, or adaptability, every challenge represents an opportunity for success. Unexpected difficulties become chances to demonstrate resilience. Apparent setbacks might be precisely the moments that contribute most significantly to the final evaluation. Without understanding the scoring system, we can't determine which actions matter most. This uncertainty forces consideration of what's worth doing regardless of how we're being judged. What values would you uphold if you didn't know the criteria for success? How would you behave if every choice carried unknown significance? This perspective permanently alters perception of daily existence. You begin noticing the intricate balance between order and chaos, how life persists in every possible environment, how humanity continues advancing despite countless obstacles. Perhaps this balance itself contains the key, whether we're meant to accept it, change it, or simply learn from observing it. Small choices gain unexpected weight under this framework. Kindness towards strangers, persistence through mundane difficulties, curiosity about mysteries, any of these could represent crucial elements in a vast evaluation we don't recognize. Once you've seriously considered whether Earth serves as humanity's testing ground, the question doesn't disappear. It settles into the background of consciousness, subtly influencing how you interpret patterns, coincidences, and challenges. It changes what you notice about the world around you. This transformation makes it natural to examine Earth's physical characteristics more carefully. If our planet truly serves as an examination facility, its environmental conditions might offer clues about the test's design and purpose. The stage itself could reveal the intentions of those who set it. When you approach Earth as a testing ground, the logical first step involves analyzing the setup, the environmental parameters, the operational conditions, the stage where this grand experiment unfolds. Every aspect of our planetary home might contain intentional design elements that serve specific functions in whatever assessment we're undergoing. The question reshapes everything you thought you knew about existence. It waits patiently in the corners of your mind, ready to reframe every experience through this new lens of possibility. When you analyze Earth through the lens of experimental design, our planet reveals itself as suspiciously well-equipped for its hypothetical role. Every major characteristic appears calibrated with precision challenging enough to drive development, yet stable enough to prevent total system collapse. The more deeply you examine these conditions, the more they resemble carefully selected parameters rather than cosmic accidents. Consider our orbital positioning first. Earth occupies that narrow-band astronomers call the habitable zone, a mission neither too close to our star nor too distant. Move us significantly closer, and solar radiation would strip away our protective atmosphere while boiling away our oceans. Every living thing would be incinerated under relentless heat. Shift us farther out, and we'd become a frozen wasteland wrapped in perpetual ice, where nothing could survive except perhaps the hardiest microorganisms. Instead, we orbit at a distance that delivers warmth without destruction, energy without annihilation. This Goldilocks zone provides exactly the right conditions for liquid water to exist. Not too hot, not too cold, but perfectly balanced for life as we understand it. Our planetary tilt offers another example of precise calibration. Earth rotates on an axis tilted approximately 23.5 degrees from vertical. This seemingly minor detail creates our seasonal variations, moderate changes that shape agriculture, influence animal migration patterns, and establish natural rhythms governing human civilization. Increase that tilt significantly, and weather extremes would become so violent that stable societies might never develop. Reduce it substantially, and climate would remain static across the globe, eliminating much of the environmental pressure that drives evolutionary adaptation. From a testing perspective, seasons provide the perfect balance, predictable enough for planning, challenging enough to require constant adjustment. The moon's presence adds another layer of apparent intentionality. Our natural satellite is unusually large relative to Earth's size, positioned at precisely the right distance to generate tides that energize ocean systems without flooding continents. These tidal cycles may have been essential for early life development, creating dynamic coastal environments where nutrients and conditions shifted regularly, spurring evolutionary innovation. Beyond tides, the moon stabilizes our planet's rotation, preventing chaotic wobbling that would create unpredictable climate variations. Long-term stability combined with manageable short-term challenges represents ideal testing conditions. Enough consistency for complex life to develop, enough variation to measure adaptive responses. Our atmospheric composition demonstrates equally suspicious precision. The air surrounding us contains exactly the right mixture of gases to sustain complex life while protecting us from cosmic dangers. Nitrogen dominates at roughly 78%, providing stable background conditions. Oxygen comprises about 21%, sufficient for respiration without creating fire hazards that would make civilization impossible. Carbon dioxide exists in trace amounts minus enough to help regulate planetary temperature through greenhouse effects, not enough to trigger runaway heating. Water vapor varies by location and season, driving weather patterns that distribute resources across the globe. If any of these proportions shifted dramatically, Earth would become uninhabitable within generations. The atmosphere's density creates another perfectly calibrated condition, thick enough to burn up most meteors before impact, yet thin enough to allow essential solar radiation to reach the surface, dense enough to maintain stable air pressure, yet not so heavy that it crushes surface-dwelling life forms. Earth's magnetic field provides invisible but crucial protection generated by movement in our planet's molten core. This electromagnetic shield deflects solar wind and cosmic radiation that would otherwise strip away our atmosphere over geological time. Mars offers a cautionary example. So lacking a strong magnetic field, the red planet lost most of its atmosphere and water to space, becoming the barren world we observe today. Without this protective barrier, Earth would face constant bombardment from high-energy particles that could damage ecosystems and prevent the emergence of complex civilizations. For a long-term experiment spanning billions of years, such protection would be essential, not complete safety, but enough security to allow the test to run its course. Water distribution across our planet occupies another sweet spot of precise balance. We have enough liquid water to support diverse ecosystems without drowning all land masses. This water exists in all three states, ice, liquid, and vapor, creating a dynamic cycle that regulates climate and supports countless different environments. The water cycle itself drives weather patterns, distributes nutrients, and creates the environmental variety essential for testing life under different conditions. Deserts challenge survival skills. Rainforests test adaptation to abundance. Tundra regions measure endurance against harsh conditions. Ocean environments push the development of entirely different survival strategies. This environmental diversity ensures that no single catastrophe could eliminate all life forms simultaneously. The resulting biosphere demonstrates remarkable resilience. Myri is exactly what you'd want to measure in a comprehensive examination of life's potential. Geological processes add another dimension of apparent design. Plate tectonics continuously reshape continents, create mountain ranges, and generate volcanic activity that renews soil fertility while recycling carbon through the system. These processes regulate planetary temperature over millions of years, preventing Earth from becoming either too hot or too cold for life. Without geological activity, our planet might have stagnated into a lifeless, unchanging sphere. With it, Earth remains in constant renewal, creating new opportunities for species development while testing established life forms against changing conditions. From an experimental perspective, this resembles pressing a controlled reset button in specific regions without shuttering the entire system. Even Earth's dangerous aspects begin looking like intentional design elements when viewed through this framework. Hurricanes, earthquakes, droughts, and volcanic eruptions cause tremendous suffering and destruction. Yet they also force adaptation, drive technological development, encourage cooperation, and test both individual resilience and collective problem-solving abilities. A completely safe, unchanging environment might be comfortable, but it would reveal nothing about how life responds to pressure or how civilizations handle unexpected challenges. The difficulties we face could be precisely calibrated to push development without causing total extinction. Scientists frequently marvel at the astronomical improbability of all these factors aligning by chance. Our sun burns with unusual stability for a star of its size. Giant planets like Jupiter act as gravitational shields, deflecting comets and asteroids that might otherwise bombard Earth with devastating frequency. Our planet's chemical composition matches exactly what biological processes require, including trace elements that are rare elsewhere in the universe. Some interpret this fine-tuning as evidence of divine creation or cosmic design. Others explain it through the anthropic principle, we can only observe conditions that allow our existence, so naturally our environment appears perfectly suited for life. But if Earth truly serves as humanity's testing ground, this fine-tuning represents careful setup. The experiment begins with starting conditions where success remains possible but not guaranteed, allowing observers to measure what happens when life receives a nearly optimal foundation and then faces unpredictable challenges throughout its development. The delicate nature of Earth's life-supporting systems reveals another layer of potential design. These finely balanced conditions exist perpetually on the knife's edge between functionality and collapse. Shift any major parameter slightly, and the entire system could spiral into uninhabitable extremes. Ice ages demonstrate this fragility perfectly. When global temperatures drop just a few degrees, massive glaciers can lock away enormous quantities of water for millennia, dramatically altering sea levels and climate patterns. Atmospheric composition changes can trigger runaway greenhouse effects or plunge the planet into frozen darkness. Asteroid impacts can reset evolutionary progress in a matter of hours. Yet despite experiencing at least 5 major extinction events over the past 500 million years, life has consistently recovered and evolved into increasingly complex forms. Each catastrophic reset has been followed by evolutionary explosions that produced entirely new types of organisms, often more sophisticated than their predecessors. From an experimental perspective, this pattern represents exactly what you'd want to observe: near not effortless success without struggle, but resilience and innovation following devastating setbacks. The test wouldn't measure perfection, but rather the capacity to recover, adapt, and transcend previous limitations. When you consider life's journey through these cycles of destruction and renewal, the examination appears to focus on persistence across timescales that dwarf human comprehension. From primitive microorganisms to complex mammals, Earth has served as a proving ground for endurance, creativity, and adaptation spanning billions of years. Humanity represents merely the latest participants in this ancient ongoing process. This timeline raises an uncomfortable possibility. We might not be the first intelligent species to undergo this examination. If Earth has been configured to produce increasing complexity, then intelligence could have emerged previously in forms that left no traces we've discovered. These predecessors might have failed their version of the test through self-destruction, environmental collapse, or challenges beyond their capabilities. If true, our current existence represents just the latest iteration in a series of experiments. The conditions we observe now might be refined parameters based on lessons learned from numerous previous attempts. Each run of the experiment could have provided data leading to adjustments in the testing environment. Viewed through this lens, every aspect of our natural world, from lunar orbital mechanics to ocean current patterns, begins resembling intentional variables in a massive ongoing trial. The question transforms from "Is Earth perfect for life?" to "Why was it calibrated to be suitable enough for life to flourish, yet challenging enough to constantly test that life's limits?" This balance between stability and chaos represents optimal conditions for generating meaningful experimental results. A perfect paradise wouldn't encourage growth or reveal capabilities under pressure. A hostile wasteland wouldn't allow complex development. This intermediate state might poised between order and disorder, creates exactly the environment where the most revealing data would emerge. When you venture outside with this perspective, environmental details strike you differently. Trees extracting carbon dioxide while releasing oxygen, pollinators maintaining entire ecosystem networks, weather patterns that shift just enough to remain unpredictable. Minus all of it begins feeling less like random background processes and more like carefully orchestrated systems designed to measure responses. If the stage has been constructed with such precision, the next logical inquiry concerns the script, whether the challenges and opportunities within this setting demonstrate equal intentionality. Because if planetary conditions have been prepared so meticulously, it would be strange if events occurring here were purely accidental. If Earth truly functions as an elaborately prepared stage, the next observation involves the comprehensive set of rules governing existence here. We don't recall agreeing to these parameters, may not fully comprehend their implications, but they exist nonetheless and shape every aspect of experience from birth until death. Some rules appear obvious, embedded in physics and biology. Others remain subtle, invisible boundaries we only recognize when we encounter them. If our planet really serves as humanity's testing ground, these rules could represent hidden instructions, the examination's fine print that participants never get to review until completion. The most inescapable rule is temporal progression. The time advances relentlessly forward regardless of your desires or actions. You cannot decelerate, pause, or reverse its flow. You cannot return to modify past moments or skip ahead to preview outcomes. Every decision you make locks in the path behind while reshaping the route ahead. From a testing perspective, this represents one of the most effective constraints possible. Without advanced knowledge of consequences, you must choose based on currently available information and accept whatever results follow. This single rule reveals tremendous amounts about character, judgment, and adaptability under uncertainty. Physical vulnerability represents another universal limitation. Bodies require sustenance, hydration, and rest. They're susceptible to injury and disease. They deteriorate over time without exception. Nobody gets exempted from these constraints. This creates a level playing field where survival never becomes automatic, regardless of starting conditions. Everyone faces the same fundamental requirements. In an experimental scenario, this ensures that continued existence must be earned continuously through meeting basic needs despite whatever other challenges arise. Pain, now both physical and emotional need, might constitute another built-in parameter. It signals problems while simultaneously teaching lessons. Pain modifies behavior, encouraging avoidance of harmful actions while motivating solution seeking. It can develop empathy when witnessing others endure familiar suffering. In a designed environment, pain would serve essential functions. Without it, no immediate feedback would follow poor choices or dangerous situations. With it, constant data flows regarding responses to difficulty met, whether participants avoid challenges, confront them directly, or use personal suffering as motivation to help others. Loss operates as another seemingly universal rule. Nothing here remains permanent. People, possessions, opportunities can all vanish, sometimes without warning. In experimental terms, this could be intentional, measuring how participants handle unavoidable change. Do they fixate on what's gone, adapt to remaining circumstances, or construct something entirely new? While loss feels intensely personal when experienced, from a larger perspective, it might represent one of the most revealing measurements available. Beyond universal constraints, human-created rules add additional complexity. These aren't fixed by natural law, but are equally real in their effects. Legal systems, cultural customs, and unwritten social expectations determine what's acceptable, rewarded, or punished. These parameters vary dramatically across different regions, which makes them particularly interesting from a testing standpoint. Behavior praised in one culture might be condemned elsewhere. This variation could be part of the design meters measuring how people navigate conflicting systems, or whether they question the rules they inherit. Then there are rules that seem specifically designed to create tension and conflict. Resources remain limited despite human ingenuity. Scarcity creates one of the most revealing dynamics in this planetary examination. There simply isn't enough of everything for everyone to possess unlimited quantities of whatever they desire. This fundamental limitation forces constant decision-making that reveals core character traits. When resources become limited, Do you share generously or hoard selfishly? Do you compete aggressively or seek collaborative solutions? Do you stockpile from fear or maintain trust that needs will be met? In cooperative scenarios, scarcity measures teamwork capabilities. In competitive environments, it tests strategic thinking. Here on Earth, it evaluates both simultaneously because human existence requires constant navigation between cooperation and competition. Not every rule involves restriction. Some create opportunities, though these arrive with hidden limitations. You can acquire new skills, forge meaningful relationships, and create previously non-existent innovations. You can relocate to different environments, change careers entirely, or start completely fresh if you're willing to accept the associated risks. However, every opportunity demands payment in time, energy, or resources. The relentless forward march of time means you cannot pursue every possibility that presents itself. Choice becomes mandatory, and through choosing you undergo evaluation. What priorities do you reveal when forced to select between competing options? These rules prove especially challenging because they don't announce themselves immediately. Some become apparent only through experience. Others remain mysterious even after decades of observation. Sometimes apparent loopholes turn out to be additional testing mechanisms designed to measure responses to seemingly easy victories that carry unexpected consequences. Even phenomena we label as luck, mice positive, or negative might be structural elements of the examination. Randomness serves as a powerful testing tool because it prevents participants from becoming overly comfortable with predictable patterns. If you knew exactly when and how challenges would appear, advanced preparation would become possible every time. But when chance influences outcomes, adaptation must occur spontaneously. During moments when plans collapse and unexpected events unfold, the clearest picture emerges of how individuals actually respond under pressure. These unscripted reactions reveal authentic character more than carefully planned behaviors. Significantly, the rules don't apply identically to everyone. We don't all begin from the same starting position. Some people enter existence with wealth, health, and security. Others begin facing poverty, illness, or danger. From one perspective, this appears fundamentally unfair. From another, it represents a method for measuring different variables. How do people respond when beginning with advantages? How do they react when starting from disadvantaged positions? Do initial conditions predict final outcomes, or can determination, intelligence, and social support alter trajectories? Can character development overcome circumstantial limitations? Viewed this way, the diversity of human experience isn't a design flaw. It's the entire point. Variation in starting positions, environments, and challenges creates the wide range of possible responses necessary for comprehensive evaluation. If the goal involves gathering maximum information about how intelligent, adaptable beings handle existence, diversity becomes essential. Despite all these observations, we receive no official rulebook. No checklist exists to follow. No manual explains which actions improve your score. We must guess, experiment, and learn through trial and error. This uncertainty can feel frustrating, but it makes the process genuinely revealing. If you knew precisely what was being measured, you might modify behavior to optimize performance rather than act authentically. Without that knowledge, your choices reveal true priorities instead of calculated responses designed to earn points. In this way, the rules we never consciously agreed to function less like strict laws and more like the physics of whatever game we're participating in. They establish boundaries of possibility and operational conditions. You cannot change them, but you can learn to work effectively within them. Through this process, you reveal fundamental aspects of your character and capabilities. The very act of learning these rules might be part of the examination itself. Some people navigate life without ever questioning underlying systems. Others spend years attempting to understand patterns, searching for meaning, pushing against limitations to discover where they yield. In an environment designed to evaluate adaptability, both approaches could provide valuable data. The deeper you contemplate this framework, the more these invisible agreements become apparent. They operate in how societies develop hierarchies, how nature cycles through growth and decay, how every living entity must expend energy to acquire it. They're woven so deeply into reality's structure that we rarely question their existence. When we do examine them closely, we often discover no easy answers exist. Perhaps that's intentional. Maybe the test isn't about following rules perfectly, but about your response when you understand them, minds, or when you realize you never truly will. Real decisions happen in that space of uncertainty. There you choose whether to accept things as they are, attempt to change them, or work around them in unprecedented ways. From this perspective, the rules become less like a prison and more like a framework. They don't dictate exactly what to do, but they give shape to the space in which you act. Within that shaped space, your actual story unfolds. If Earth truly serves as humanity's testing ground, the next place to seek clues isn't just in environmental structure or life's limitations, it's in the stories we've told about our purpose here for as long as we've possessed the ability to tell them. When you search for humanity's earliest ideas about existence, you don't find equations or laboratory reports. You discover stories preserved through memory long before writing systems developed. Carved into stone, painted on cave walls, spoken around fires, whispered in temples, long before anyone possessed tools to measure solar distances or map ocean floors, people were already explaining life in terms that made sense to them. Across different places and time periods, you find the same recurring theme: life functions as a kind of trial. Sometimes this appears as straightforward moral testing. Ancient Egyptian mythology includes the famous weighing of the heart ceremony. After death, the deceased person's heart would be placed on scales opposite Mads, feather Mads, the goddess representing truth and order. If the heart weighed less than the feather, entry into the afterlife became possible. If heavier, it would be devoured, and existence would end. This striking image conveys a clear message: actions during life determine post-death consequences. This isn't merely storytelling, minds. It represents belief in a system that evaluates and judges every individual. Ancient Greek philosophers often described life as a proving ground for the soul. Plato discussed the immortal soul being tested through earthly experiences, learning and refining itself through each lifetime. His dialogue suggests the physical world serves as an imperfect place, designed to challenge mind and spirit, preparing them for something beyond material existence. Even Greek concepts of virtue and qualities like courage, temperance, and justice carry implications of characteristics you're expected to develop through effort rather than receive automatically. Across the world in ancient China, Confucianism emphasized life as continuous self-cultivation, an ongoing assessment of moral character. Confucian teachings viewed behavior in family, community, and governance as more than practical organization. Confucian philosophy viewed personal conduct as a continuous evaluation of character. Your behavior within family structures, community relationships, and governmental roles wasn't simply about maintaining practical social order. It represented a measurement of your identity and whether you fulfilled your designated function in creating societal harmony. The examination here focused not necessarily on afterlife consequences, but on demonstrating worthiness through maintaining balance and completing responsibilities. Success meant proving your value through actions that contributed to collective well-being. Indigenous traditions across the Americas, Africa, and Oceania consistently frame existence in terms of journeys, trials, and lessons. Native American stories often portray life as a path filled with obstacles designed to impart wisdom. Many African traditions understand hardships as essential experiences that prepare the spirit for its eventual place among ancestors. Polynesian cultures frequently connect challenges encountered at sea and on land to spiritual development. The belief holds that endurance, skill, and respect for natural forces all serve as measures of readiness to join ancestors or deities. These aren't random difficulties, but purposeful tests of character and capability. Organized religions built on written scriptures tend to be even more explicit about life functioning as an examination. In Islamic teachings, the Quran repeatedly describes existence as a divine trial where rewards and consequences depend on faith and actions. Christianity presents the concept of final judgment, where salvation or damnation follows from deeds and beliefs performed during earthly life. Hinduism's cycle of birth, death, and rebirth minus samsara operates as a series of lessons where karma functions as both record keeper and mechanism for the testing process. Each lifetime provides opportunities to learn and advance or to repeat previous mistakes. What proves fascinating is how these concepts persist across vastly different cultures and historical periods. Specifics vary regarding who administers the examination, what criteria determine success, and what rewards or punishments follow. Yet the fundamental premise remains consistent. Life isn't random. It represents a process with genuine stakes where actions matter and something or someone maintains accountability. This similarity could be explained several ways. Perhaps different civilizations were all sensing the same underlying truth, each expressing it through their own cultural language. Maybe it simply reflects how human consciousness operates. We desire meaning in existence, and testing provides an easily understood framework. Or perhaps something more strategic is at work. If you were designing an environment like Earth, embedding the concept of ongoing evaluation into cultural consciousness could steer behavior without direct intervention. The belief that actions are being observed and judged, even when the observer remains invisible, creates powerful motivation for ethical conduct. These ancient systems typically balance reward and fear effectively. Paradise, enlightenment, divine union as these represent appealing outcomes. Eternal punishment, exile, reincarnation into unfortunate circumstances, these are consequences most would desperately avoid. In worlds lacking constant surveillance or modern law enforcement, such beliefs functioned as invisible frameworks for maintaining social order. If Earth truly serves as humanity's testing ground, these belief systems might not represent spontaneous human creations, but rather tools serving the larger experimental structure. Notice how many ancient testing concepts involve both individual and communal dimensions. Success isn't determined solely by private actions, but by how effectively you function within group settings. Many traditions identify selfishness or community harm as rapid paths to failure, while cooperation, generosity, and role fulfillment lead to success. If you were attempting to measure whether a species could collaborate on planetary scales, these would be precisely the values you'd want to encourage from early developmental stages. Of course, these ancient insights also raise troubling questions. If life represents a test, why do the rules seem so dramatically different depending on when and where you're born? Why does one culture emphasize faith in specific deities, while another stresses harmony with nature, and yet another focuses on mastering particular virtues? If this were a controlled experiment, you could argue that variety is intentional. By providing different groups with different instructions, you could observe how they develop independently, how they interact when meeting other cultures, and whether they can reconcile conflicting worldviews. This raises another intriguing possibility. Maybe the test isn't about the rules themselves, but about responses when rules conflict. History overflows with moments where different cultures, each convinced they possessed the correct path, encountered one another. Sometimes these meetings produced exchange and cooperation, other times they resulted in conquest and destruction. From a testing perspective, both outcomes would provide revealing data about human nature under pressure. When fundamental beliefs clash, do we seek understanding or resort to violence? Do we adapt our worldviews or double down on existing convictions? When you contemplate the profound influence of these ancient beliefs, you realize they've shaped far more than personal behavior. They've guided entire civilizations, influenced legal systems, inspired artistic masterpieces, motivated exploration, and justified wars. If they represent components of a larger examination, their role extends far beyond symbolic meaning. They'd constitute central mechanisms for directing the human experiment towards specific outcomes. Even today, long after many ancient cultures have vanished, their core concepts persist. The belief that life contains purpose beyond mere survival appears in secular philosophies, self-improvement movements, and discussions about personal growth. We might avoid calling it a trial anymore, but the idea that we're here to learn, improve, or prove something remains difficult to dismiss. Perhaps this persistence represents the most significant evidence of all. Across thousands of years, countless languages, and every type of human society, we continuously return to the same fundamental question: what is existence for? The answers have been wrapped in mythology, ritual, philosophy, and faith traditions. But the question itself never disappears. This could simply reflect an inherent aspect of human consciousness. Or it could mean we're intended to keep asking, mean that this represents one of the test's central prompts, still awaiting our discovery of the answer. This naturally leads to wondering about the observer's perspective. If someone or something is indeed watching, how would they perceive us? Not as we see ourselves, but as a species navigating this extended, unpredictable trial. If the concept of life as examination has accompanied humanity throughout our storytelling history, the next logical consideration involves identifying who, if anyone, might be administering it. Here the discussion shifts from symbolic interpretation to literal possibility. Ancient traditions provided names and forms for those they believed were watching Mike's gods, spirits, ancestors, celestial judges. They imagined these observers in human form, as animals or as natural forces. But if you extract the core concept while removing specific imagery, you're left with a simple yet unsettling question. Is someone actually observing everything we do? If such observers exist, they've maintained remarkable discretion. Whoever they might be, they haven't landed on government lawns or appeared in crowded stadiums to announce their presence, obviously. These hypothetical observers haven't transmitted clear communications in every human language, explaining examination rules and objectives. If they're monitoring us, they're doing so while maintaining our uncertainty. This secrecy might be completely intentional. In any scientific study, when subjects understand exactly what's being measured, their behavior fundamentally changes. This principle applies equally in psychological laboratories, academic settings, and employment interviews. If Earth functions as humanity's testing ground, concealing the observers might represent the only method for obtaining authentic, unfiltered results. Consider the range of possibilities for who these watchers might be. The oldest and most familiar option involves divine beings, a creator or group of creators possessing power beyond human comprehension. In this scenario, everything we observe represents their handiwork, and every moment of existence is known to them completely. For believers in this possibility, being observed doesn't feel disturbing, and it provides reassurance. It confirms existence as purpose, even if not fully explained, and guarantees that no action, beneficial or harmful, escapes notice. Alternatively, consider extraterrestrial intelligence. Somewhere in our galaxy or beyond, an advanced civilization might monitor countless projects like Earth. To them, our planet could function as a controlled environment, similar to a nature preserve or extended field study. From their perspective, we might resemble wildlife researchers tracking animal migrations, except our monitoring devices could be invisible, integrated into the fundamental structure of experienced reality itself. Another intriguing possibility involves future humans as observers. If time travel or advanced simulation technology eventually becomes achievable, our descendants might examine this historical period by recreating it, not for entertainment but for study. In such a scenario, we could be existing within a reconstruction of Earth's past, with every detail recreated from historical records and every person simulated with sufficient complexity to behave authentically. These observers might enter and exit our reality unnoticed, adjusting variables and measuring our responses. This concept brings us toward the simulation hypothesis, the notion that our entire world could be a highly detailed, computer-generated environment operated by intelligence external to it. If true, then observers aren't simply watching from a distance. They maintain complete control over environmental rules, from physics governing matter to historical events that unfold. Whether they'd be classified as scientists, engineers, or something approaching storytellers would depend entirely on their motivations. Regardless of their identity, if they exist at all, they've had to determine how visible to make themselves. This creates significant complexity in the overall picture. Throughout history, people have reported experiencing phenomena that didn't fit normal life patterns. Mysterious lights in the sky, visions of otherworldly beings, sudden insights or messages appearing from nowhere. Some dismiss these as coincidences, illusions, or misunderstandings. Others interpret them as hints that watchers aren't entirely absent, just cautious. The challenge with hints involves their openness to interpretation. One person's miracle becomes another's optical illusion. Mysterious sounds could represent technical glitches or deliberate signals. If watchers exist and desire ambiguity, this approach would be perfect. Make appearances just rare and strange enough to spark curiosity, but insufficient to eliminate doubt. This way, those inclined toward belief will discover evidence, while skeptics will find alternative explanations. Both groups continue behaving according to their natural instincts, providing observers with more comprehensive data. What would they be seeking? If divine in nature, perhaps they focus on moral and spiritual development. Whether we learn compassionate living, whether we resist temptations to harm others for personal advantage. If extraterrestrial, their objectives could be more scientific, neat as testing how intelligent species develop technology, governance systems, and social structures within isolated environments. If they represent future humans, their interest might center on understanding historical turning points, moments when we made choices leading to survival or catastrophe. The scale of observation could vary dramatically. Some scenarios imagine every action being recorded, every thought somehow registered, as if each individual's life becomes a complete file in vast archives. Others suggest focus might emphasize trends rather than individuals, watching how groups form and dissolve, how cultures transform, how technology alters balances between cooperation and conflict. From this perspective, observers might function less like examination proctors and more like ecologists studying forests, noting species balance, growth and collapse cycles, subtle changes over extended periods. If they exist, their methods could far exceed anything we can imagine. They might alter global events without leaving traces, nudging entire civilizations toward specific directions, or they might intervene only minimally, like placing single stones in rivers to observe current shifts. From our perspective, both types of actions could remain invisible, hidden within history's background noise. There's also the possibility we've mistaken their absence for non-existence. Just because we haven't detected them doesn't prove they're not present. We already inhabit a world filled with signals and forces invisible without proper instruments, radiation, magnetic fields, vast networks of radio transmissions passing through us continuously. Observers possessing incomprehensible technology could be close enough to touch without us having the slightest awareness of their presence. Then there's the question of whether they care about outcomes the same way we do. If we're being tested, we naturally assume results matter profoundly, but to observers, this test could be one among many. We might represent a single project among thousands, no more or less significant than others. This doesn't necessarily make our lives feel meaningless, but it does alter perspective dramatically. It's possible to imagine scenarios where our successes and failures serve as data points in much larger studies. How? Interesting but not central to the lives of those collecting information. What makes this concept most unsettling isn't necessarily that someone is watching Mick, it's that we don't understand their intentions. Are they hoping for our success? Are they indifferent, simply gathering information? Are they testing us for reasons we couldn't even comprehend? Without this knowledge, we're left with pure speculation. The watchers could be benevolent guides hoping we'll pass every challenge. They could be neutral scientists documenting whatever happens without preference for outcomes. They could be judges with criteria so alien to human thinking that our assumptions about right and wrong become irrelevant. This uncertainty creates a unique form of existential anxiety. You might be performing for an audience we can't see, following rules we don't understand, working toward goals we can't identify. Yet perhaps this uncertainty itself represents part of the examination. How do we behave when we don't know if anyone is watching? What choices do we make when we can't calculate the consequences? How do we treat others when we're unsure if kindness matters? In some ways, acting ethically despite uncertainty might be more meaningful than following rules because you know you're being graded. Speculation has a way of revealing patterns in places you'd ordinarily ignore, not merely in ancient mythology, but in how history unfolds, how events seem to echo across time, how certain moments feel deliberately orchestrated to test our responses. If you imagine these moments as points where hypothetical watchers lean forward, taking detailed notes, you begin wondering what comes next. Because if they exist, then everything from empire collapses to individual acts of kindness towards strangers could be part of their evaluation process. This means our lives, regardless of how insignificant they appear against the universe's vast scale, might be far more visible than we've ever imagined. This naturally leads us to examine how the environment under observation has transformed from small human groups scattered across continents to interconnected civilizations capable of sharing ideas, culture, and conflicts instantaneously. If this represents a test, then the setting isn't static. It evolves continuously, and so do the challenges. Imagine hypothetical watchers observing Earth throughout centuries. What they've witnessed hasn't been a static experiment, but a classroom that constantly rearranges itself. Students change, lessons transform, tools evolve, yet learning never ceases. Civilization, from this perspective, isn't merely the test's backdrop that's one of the primary testing instruments. It shapes the questions we face, problems requiring solutions, and methods of interaction with one another. It's easy to view civilization as something that simply occurred in then a gradual accumulation of farming, construction, trade, and organization, leading from small groups to vast interconnected societies. But examined as part of a trial, it takes on different significance. Small, scattered groups can only confront certain types of challenges. They test individual skills, survival instincts, and small group cooperation abilities. Bring those groups together into villages, then towns, then cities, and you create entirely new problem categories. Scarcity on larger scales, disputes between strangers, needs for shared rules extending beyond blood ties or personal reputation. In educational settings, work difficulty typically increases as students advance. If this represents a test, civilization may be that difficulty increase. As societies have grown, so has the complexity of situations we face. Instead of finding enough food for your family, you're determining how to feed millions. Instead of settling neighbor disputes directly, you're navigating legal systems, political structures, and cultural norms. Instead of defending your group from single threats, you're balancing diplomacy, trade, and global conflict prevention. Watchers, if they exist, wouldn't need to intervene in every detail. They could simply allow civilization to develop while observing how we adapt to its pressures. Those pressures remain constant. Cities test patience and cooperation by crowding millions into close quarters. Trade tests fairness and restraint by offering both greed's temptation and mutual benefit opportunities. Technology tests judgment by providing tools powerful enough to solve enormous problems or create even bigger ones. Step back and consider. Civilization forces us into a permanent group project. Complete opt-out becomes impossible. Even wilderness isolation still subjects you to distant decisions, pulls goods movement, industrial impact, laws and agreements shaping borders and trade. This interconnectedness creates conditions beyond full control. Another hallmark of well-designed testing. How you respond when others' actions affect your life reveals much about adaptability, resourcefulness, and priorities. Significantly, civilization doesn't just test individuals' struck, it tests the systems we construct. Governments, economies, religions, educational institutions, health systems all represent attempts at organizing human life at scale. Some function well temporarily, then collapse under their own weight. Others adapt and survive for centuries. Each represents a trial run of an idea. Can society function with everyone equal under law? What happens when power concentrates in few hands? How does new technology reshape cooperation, competition, balance? From watchers' perspective, these systems might be the real study subjects. People live and die within decades, but civilizations can persist for hundreds or thousands of years. Observing their rise and fall could reveal patterns about how intelligent beings organize themselves, what causes thriving, what triggers collapse. If the test's purpose involves determining whether a species can manage large-scale cooperation without self-destruction, then civilization provides the arena where this challenge unfolds. It's not solely about cooperation. Civilizations also produce art, philosophy, science, and culture, all potentially part of the evaluation. How does a species express itself when safe enough to do more than survive? What ideas do they value, and how do they transmit them? Do they use knowledge to improve everyone's life, or create advantages for select few? These questions naturally surface through civilization without watchers needing to ask directly. It's tempting to think the test, if it exists, seeks a single correct way to operate civilization, but history suggests otherwise. The variety of social structures we've attempted is enormous. Nomadic hunter-gatherer bands to sprawling empires, from strict hierarchies to direct democracy experiments. Each has strengths and weaknesses, producing different results regarding stability, fairness, and innovation. If watchers are learning from us, they're not simply grading success or failure, they're cataloging the range of possibilities. This appears in how similar challenges reappear across different times and places. Details change: weapons, transportation, communication methods, but underlying problems remain constant. How do you maintain order without crushing individual freedom? How do you distribute resources fairly when they're limited? How do you handle disagreements between groups with fundamentally different values? These questions have challenged every civilization that's ever existed. From a testing perspective, this repetition makes perfect sense. If you want to understand how a species handles certain situations, you need multiple data points. You need to see what happens when the same basic problem appears in different contexts with different tools and knowledge available. Ancient Rome faced resource distribution challenges with different solutions than modern democracies, but the fundamental tension between individual desires and collective needs remains identical. Medieval kingdoms handled succession crises differently than contemporary nations, but the underlying question of peaceful power transfer persists. If civilization serves as humanity's testing ground, then these recurring patterns represent controlled variables in a massive experiment. The surface details change, but the core challenges remain consistent enough to generate comparable data across different eras and cultures. Technology adds another fascinating dimension to this evolving test. Each major advancement doesn't just change how we live, it changes what kinds of problems we face and what solutions become possible. The printing press didn't just make books cheaper, it transformed how ideas spread, how authority was questioned, how knowledge was preserved. The internet didn't just make communication faster, it reshaped commerce, relationships, education, and even warfare. If watchers are monitoring our development, they're seeing how we handle not just individual technologies, but the accelerating pace of change itself. Can we adapt quickly enough? Do we use new capabilities wisely? How do we balance innovation's benefits against its risks? From their perspective, each technological leap might represent a new phase of the examination, with increasingly complex scenarios testing our collective wisdom and judgment. How do you prevent power from corrupting those who wield it? How do you balance individual liberty with collective needs? How do you respond when scarcity transforms neighbors into competitors? These recurring themes might be less like random occurrences, and more like fundamental questions embedded in the examination, appearing in various forms so they can't be solved once and dismissed forever. One of civilization's most revealing aspects involves its approach to change. Some societies adapt rapidly to new concepts and technologies, while others resist until forced to transform. Change can emerge internally when reform movements challenge established systems, or externally when cultures encounter each other and both undergo transformation. Either way, the process reveals what values truly matter to a society and how much risk it will accept to preserve or abandon them. There's also the matter of conflict. Civilization doesn't eliminate it. If anything, it amplifies disagreements. With larger populations, more resources, and increased complexity, come more opportunities for disputes. From a testing perspective, this represents another deliberate pressure point. How do large groups resolve conflicts? Do they discover peaceful compromises, or do they escalate toward violence? Do they create institutions to prevent warfare? And if so, do those institutions endure over time? Answers to these questions could reveal much about whether a species is prepared for challenges beyond its home planet. Of course, civilization isn't purely struggle, it's also a source of cooperation on scales impossible without organized society. The global effort to map the human genome, construction of the International Space Station, creation of worldwide communication networks. These achievements require coordination among millions of people across cultures and continents. They demonstrate that large-scale collaboration is possible, at least under certain circumstances. If watchers seek evidence of our ability to work together, these might represent the most encouraging signs. Still, cooperation in one area doesn't guarantee it in another. A civilization can produce groundbreaking scientific advances while failing to meet basic needs for all citizens. It can achieve incredible engineering feats while neglecting environmental health. These contradictions might provide the most important data points of all, showing the limits of our priorities and the trade-offs we accept. Step back far enough, and you can view civilization as an extended stress test. Each generation inherits systems built by predecessors, attempts improvements, and either strengthens or weakens them through the process. Sometimes changes are deliberate. Other times they result from accidents, discoveries, or disasters. Either way, the outcome involves constant reshaping of the human world. From hypothetical watcher's perspective, this slow transformation might be precisely the point, not stability for its own sake, but the ability to navigate instability without losing capacities for cooperation and creation. What makes this more compelling is our current era of unprecedented civilizational connection. Decisions made in one country can have global consequences within days or hours. Technology enables ideas, goods, and conflicts to cross borders instantly. This interconnectedness could represent the test's latest stage, measuring whether we can handle global interdependence without collapsing under our own complexity. In this sense, civilization isn't just the test-setting means, it's the examination evolving in real time. Watchers, if they exist, don't need to change rules every few centuries. They can simply allow us to change ourselves and observe what happens. As history demonstrates, what happens can be inspiring, destructive, or both simultaneously. This leads to the next layer of inquiry. If this classroom is designed to teach and measure, then some lessons are far harsher than others. Some are beautiful, filled with cooperation and creativity. Others are brutal, pushing us to our limits in ways that feel less like education and more like punishment. If Earth truly serves as humanity's testing ground, those moments of struggle might represent the most crucial questions we face. If civilization functions as the classroom, then suffering serves as one of its most persistent and unavoidable lessons. Regardless of location, systems in place, or apparent human progress, suffering continues appearing in various forms. It's not evenly distributed, not predictable, and not something anyone volunteers to experience. Yet it's everywhere, woven so tightly into human experience that you can't imagine existence without it. If this represents a test, suffering might be one of the central examination questions. It's not merely obvious physical manifestations. Illness, injury, hunger, loss of shelter, those remain most visible. But suffering can also be quieter and harder to measure. Loneliness, fear, guilt, uncertainty, regret over irreversible actions. The gradual erosion of hope when problems seem unsolvable. These forms of pain don't leave visible scars, but they shape lives just as profoundly as anything physical. From an observer's perspective, these different suffering types could function like distinct test modules, each designed to measure specific qualities: resilience, empathy, adaptability, or perhaps something we haven't named yet. The unsettling implication is that if this environment was deliberately designed, suffering could be present by choice, not accident. That's a difficult concept to accept. Most of us consider suffering something to eliminate. In medicine, technology, politics, much human effort focuses on reducing pain and hardship. But within a testing framework, removing suffering entirely could defeat the purpose. It would resemble giving a mathematics exam without problems to solve. If the goal involves observing our responses, challenges must remain. Suffering patterns make it seem even more deliberate. It often arrives without warning, forcing rapid adaptation. It doesn't always strike proportionally to a person's actions. Sometimes good people face terrible hardship while those causing harm seem untouched. In human terms, this feels unjust. In testing terms, it could be intentional, not opportunity to observe reactions when reality doesn't match our sense of justice. Do people become bitter? Do they work harder to create fairness for others? Do they lose faith in purpose altogether? Suffering also creates crossroads. Crisis can break someone down, but it can also push them to discover unknown strengths. It can transform strangers into allies, redirect life's direction, or spark movements affecting thousands or millions. From external observation, these moments could be exactly the turning points worth studying. The same event might lead one person to despair and another to transformation. The difference between these responses might reveal more about human nature than any easy victory could. Looking back through history, you can identify entire eras defined by collective suffering: wars, famines, pandemics, natural disasters. They disrupt civilization's structure, forcing societies to adapt or collapse. Sometimes the aftermath leads to breakthroughs in technology, medicine, or governance. The Black Death, Devastating as it was, contributed to the end of feudalism and rise of modern labor systems. World wars, despite their horror, accelerated technological development and international cooperation efforts. Economic depressions, while causing immense hardship, often spark innovations in policy and social organization. From a testing perspective, these patterns suggest suffering might serve multiple functions, not just measuring individual responses, but catalyzing collective evolution. It forces adaptation, sparks innovation, and reveals what truly matters when everything else falls away. This doesn't make suffering any less painful for those experiencing it, but it might explain why it persists despite our best efforts to eliminate it. If Earth functions as humanity's examination facility, then our struggles aren't bugs in the system more, they're features carefully calibrated to push development in specific directions. In other instances, collective hardship leads to extended periods of stagnation or decline. Again, from a testing perspective, both outcomes provide valuable information. They demonstrate whether groups can transform adversity into advancement or whether they disintegrate under pressure. One of the most challenging aspects to accept involves how frequently suffering results from human actions, violence, exploitation, neglect. These aren't products of an indifferent universe, but consequences of human choices. If Earth functions as our testing ground, this could represent one of the examination's most crucial components for preserving how we treat each other when given the power to cause harm or prevent it. Every act of cruelty and every gesture of kindness becomes part of the permanent record. The contrast between these behaviors might be what the test truly measures. This is where empathy becomes essential. Empathy itself might be one of the most difficult qualities to assess without suffering. It's effortless to be kind when nothing is at stake. It becomes challenging when you have something to lose, when helping someone else costs you time, resources, or safety. Suffering creates precisely those moments, situations where assistance is optional but expensive. Do we intervene anyway? Do we ignore the need? Do we convince ourselves it's not our responsibility? From external observation, these decisions could be as revealing as any scientific measurement. There's also the peculiar way suffering can connect people who might otherwise never encounter each other. Shared hardship can break down social barriers, at least temporarily. It can make enemies recognize each other's humanity or unite people from completely different backgrounds. In those moments, suffering becomes the catalyst for cooperation, even if it's not the kind anyone would choose. If watchers seek evidence of unity under pressure, these instances would be noteworthy. However, suffering doesn't guarantee unity. It can equally drive people apart, breeding resentment, mistrust, and selfishness. This dual nature, the potential to unite or divide, makes it a perfect variable for study. The same event that sparks generosity in one person might trigger greed in another. The question isn't just who survives, but how they survive and what kind of person they become through the process. On a personal level, suffering forces constant choices about perspective. Do you see yourself as a victim of circumstances or as someone capable of shaping your response? Do you believe your pain has meaning, or do you view it as meaningless chaos? Those beliefs can influence every subsequent decision, sometimes for an entire lifetime. If this represents a test, how we frame our own suffering might be just as significant as the suffering itself. There's also the possibility that suffering tests not just individuals, but entire systems. Crisis can reveal the strengths and weaknesses of governments, communities, and organizations. How quickly do they respond? Do they prioritize those in greatest need or protect the interests of the powerful? Do they adapt their policies or double down on failing approaches? From external perspective, these responses could function like stress tests in engineering, push the system until it reveals where it will break. Despite all this, suffering remains something most of us want to avoid. That desire might be part of the test as well. We invent medicines, safety devices, disaster prevention systems, all attempting to reduce harm. That represents a form of problem solving and constitutes one of humanity's strengths. But it also involves trade-offs. Sometimes measures we create to prevent suffering cause new problems of their own. From outside observation, watching how we balance prevention with unintended consequences would represent another layer of evaluation. Then there's the question of meaning. Some people find ways to frame their suffering as part of a larger purpose, a spiritual journey, a test of faith, a contribution to greater good. Others see it as meaningless and cruel, a flaw in life's design. Both views can shape behavior in powerful ways. If observers seek variety in responses, this might be one of the richest data sources. The same pain can lead one person to activism, another to isolation, another to cynicism, and another to forgiveness. The most difficult aspect about suffering, if you see it as part of deliberate design, is accepting that it might not be meant to disappear entirely. Each generation works to improve life, and in many ways conditions do improve. Fewer people live in extreme poverty. More survive previously fatal diseases. More have access to knowledge and opportunity. But suffering never vanishes completely. It changes shape. Old dangers are replaced by new ones. Specific tests shift, but hardship's presence remains constant. If you think of it as ongoing evaluation, that constancy makes sense. Without adversity, there's nothing to reveal choices we make under pressure. Without loss, there's no measure of how we value what we possess. Without risk, there's no way to determine how far we'll go to protect what matters to us. That doesn't make suffering easier to bear, but it does make it harder to dismiss as meaningless if you believe the environment is intentional. Therefore, suffering becomes not just an unfortunate aspect of life, but one of its most revealing features. It's the condition that forces us to decide repeatedly who we are and what we're willing to stand for. If Earth is a test, those decisions might be the most important answers we ever provide, missions we're still giving even now. This brings us to a different kind of question. If the test is ongoing and suffering is part of it, what exactly are we being measured against? Not in the moral terms of ancient traditions, but in the broader sense of survival, cooperation, and long-term potential. Are we being judged as individuals or as a species? And if it's the latter, what does that say about where the test might lead next? When you step back far enough, far beyond human history's span, suffering takes on an entirely different scale. It's not just personal struggles of individuals or challenges faced by single civilizations. It's the recurring pattern of life itself rising and falling, vanishing and returning in new forms. Our planet has witnessed more endings than any of us can easily imagine, and just as many beginnings. If Earth is a test, these vast cycles might be the ultimate reset mechanism, wiping the slate clean and observing what emerges next. We tend to think of extinction as something rare, a catastrophic exception to life's normal flow, but in geological terms, it's not rare at all. Most species that have ever existed are gone. The fossil record represents a long archive of experiments that ended, minus some abruptly, some gradually, minus each leaving behind clues, but no living descendants. From this perspective, humans aren't the first intelligent life to potentially face this examination. We might not even be the most advanced. Previous species could have reached greater heights before failing their version of the test. The evidence might be buried so deep or transformed so completely that we'd never recognize it. Advanced civilizations could have risen and fallen multiple times throughout Earth's history, each leaving lessons for hypothetical observers about what works and what doesn't. If true, we're not pioneers, but participants in a much longer experiment. Our successes and failures add to an accumulating database of information about intelligent life's potential and limitations. The pressure isn't just to survive, but to demonstrate that intelligence can overcome the challenges that destroyed our predecessors. This cosmic perspective makes every human achievement more significant and every mistake more costly. We're not just living our lives, we're potentially representing the latest attempt to prove that intelligent life can thrive long-term on this testing ground we call Earth. From the tiniest organisms to the mightiest predators, extinction operates as the rule rather than the exception. The causes are as diverse as the life forms that have vanished. Sometimes it's gradual climate change, the slow shifting of continental plates or steady alterations in ocean chemistry. Other times, it's a sudden catastrophe, massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, rapid atmospheric shifts. Whatever triggers these events, the outcome remains consistent. Entire branches of life's tree get severed, creating space for something completely new to flourish. If you imagine watchers observing all this, the appeal becomes clear. In one dramatic sweep, an extinction event tests adaptability on the grandest possible scale. It forces survivors to navigate an entirely transformed environment, discover new ways to exist, and evolve into forms suited for radically altered conditions. Sometimes the survivors are small, previously overlooked species that suddenly thrive in the absence of former giants. Other times, entirely new lineages emerge to dominate. From a testing perspective, these represent incredibly rich data points, demonstrations of how life responds when the fundamental rules change overnight. The most famous example in popular memory involves the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaur era. For tens of millions of years, they had ruled terrestrial environments, their dominance seemingly unquestionable. Then, in a geological instant, they vanished. The survivors, small mammals, birds, reptiles, faced a world stripped of its old order. Some adapted successfully, others didn't. Eventually, one of those small mammalian lineages would give rise to humanity itself. If you view Earth as a testing ground, it's difficult not to notice how that particular reset cleared the path for our own existence. But that wasn't the only reset. Long before dinosaurs, there were other mass extinctions. The Permian-Triassic event, often called the Great Dying, eliminated the majority of life in oceans and on land. The Ordovician-Silurian extinction devastated marine ecosystems. Each represented a different kind of trial, so removing most of what had existed and establishing conditions for new life forms to emerge. Each transformed planetary balance in ways that would have been unimaginable beforehand. From human perspective, these events are unimaginably distant. But on the test's timescale, they could be deliberate intervals like clearing the desk between assignments. If watchers want to observe not just how life adapts to gradual changes, but how it handles rapid, high-stakes transformations, extinction and renewal provide perfect tools. They strip away stability, remove familiar elements, and leave only those capable of improvising under extreme pressure. This isn't limited to biology. Even within human history, cycles echo this pattern on smaller scales. Civilizations rise, reach their peak, then collapse, often leaving behind only ruins and stories. Sometimes they fall to external forces, invasions, plagues, natural disasters. Other times they crumble from within might political instability, economic collapse, environmental degradation. Following these collapses, new societies emerge, often borrowing concepts from predecessors, but reshaping them into something different. The Roman Empire's fall has been remembered for centuries as a symbol of both power and fragility. The Maya civilization's collapse, ancient Mesopotamian cities' decline, the Khmer Empire's disintegration in Southeast Asia reminds us that no system is immune to change. In each case, what emerged afterward wasn't simply a repeat of what existed before, but a reinvention shaped by past lessons and losses. From a testing standpoint, these cycles could serve similar functions to natural mass extinction events. They test system resilience, survivor adaptability, and innovation capacity under pressure. They also provide opportunities for introducing entirely new ideas, technologies, and cultural frameworks, the intellectual equivalent of new species filling empty ecological niches. It's tempting to view these cycles as failures, as if each collapse means participants didn't pass the test. But another interpretation sees them as part of the process itself. In many educational systems, failure isn't the end, it's a step toward mastery. You take the test, identify mistakes, and try again. Civilizational collapse might not represent final judgment, but rather a method of clearing the field for different attempts. If that's accurate, then renewal becomes just as important as extinction. New systems don't emerge in a vacuum. They're shaped by memories of what came before. Even when knowledge is lost, traces remain in architecture, artifacts, and oral traditions. These remnants can guide future generations, offering warnings and inspiration. Renewal provides chances to apply those lessons, avoid past mistakes, or make entirely new ones. The interplay between extinction and renewal might be one of Earth's most revealing aspects. Too much stability provides no pressure to adapt. Too much change prevents building anything lasting. The balance between them determines development's pace and direction. Within that balance, you can observe a rhythm: long stretches of relative stability punctuated by sudden upheavals, each reshaping possibilities for what follows. Humans are unique in one crucial way. We can recognize these patterns and theoretically prepare for them. We can study the past, identify risks, and attempt to prevent or mitigate the next collapse. This adds another testing layer. If watchers are observing, they might be interested not just in how we survive after disaster, but whether we can anticipate it and act preventively. That requires entirely different skills: foresight, cooperation, and willingness to act on incomplete information. So far, our record remains mixed. We've prevented some disasters, adapted to others, and ignored warnings until too late in still more cases. Climate change, nuclear proliferation, and ecosystem collapse represent just a few challenges that could test our ability to break these cycles. The question becomes whether we can transcend the pattern of rise and fall that has characterized every previous civilization. Can we develop systems resilient enough to weather the storms that destroyed our predecessors? Can we learn from history's lessons without having to repeat its catastrophes? If Earth truly functions as humanity's testing ground, this might be the ultimate examination, not just whether we can survive individual challenges, but whether we can evolve beyond the cycle of extinction and renewal that has governed life on this planet for billions of years. From this perspective, every choice we make carries cosmic significance. We're not just living our lives or building our societies, we're potentially demonstrating whether intelligent life can break free from the patterns that have limited all previous experiments. The watchers, if they exist, might be holding their breath to see if this time will be different. If this iteration of the test will finally produce a species capable of sustainable, long-term success. Or if, like all the others before us, we'll add our chapter to the long story of rise and fall, clearing the way for whatever comes next to try again. To choose renewal without requiring extinction first and whatever we can accomplish, this might represent one of the most crucial questions in our current testing phase. There's an even deeper possibility that these cycles aren't random occurrences at all, but precisely timed events. In a long-term experiment, you might schedule resets to occur at specific intervals, giving each new iteration similar starting conditions. The triggers could be natural phenomena, or they could be engineered by watchers using methods we cannot detect. If accurate, then the test might not just involve surviving change, but recognizing the pattern and learning to adapt proactively. Whether deliberate or accidental, extinction and renewal have shaped every stage of planetary life. These forces have cleared pathways for new possibilities, eliminated the complacent, and rewarded the adaptable. From the earliest single-celled organisms to complex civilizations, everything existing now is here because something else failed to survive. If Earth functions as a testing ground, then these cycles represent the most dramatic questions we face, questions written not in words but in the turning of ages, the rise and fall of species, the ruins left behind when one world ends and another begins. The answers aren't found merely in survival, but in what we construct afterward and whether it endures long enough to face the next turning of the wheel. This leads naturally to the thought that if we've experienced this pattern multiple times before, there might be patterns hidden within our own survival story, micro patterns that could reveal what the test is leading toward, and whether we're approaching whatever success might look like. If cycles of extinction and renewal are deliberate, if they've been shaped with precision rather than left to random chance, then it's worth asking a question that, once considered, becomes difficult to dismiss. What if all of this isn't just part of a natural system, but part of an entirely artificial one? What if the world we inhabit, from the smallest detail in a grain of sand to the vast sweep of galaxies overhead, isn't fundamentally real in the way we assume, but rather a kind of constructed environment? This is where the simulation hypothesis enters our conversation, not as wild science fiction speculation, but as a serious possibility entertained by philosophers, scientists, and technologists. The concept is deceptively straightforward. We might be living inside a simulation created by intelligence existing outside our reality. That intelligence could be a highly advanced alien civilization, future humans possessing unimaginable computational power, or something we cannot categorize at all. Inside the simulation, everything would feel authentic because it's designed to. Physics remains consistent, history is detailed, and experiences are convincing. But beyond it exists a completely different level of reality, one we cannot access, at least not directly. The unsettling aspect is that, according to some thinkers, it might actually be more probable that we exist in a simulation than not. The reasoning follows this logic. If any civilization anywhere reaches the point where they can simulate conscious beings and detailed environments, they probably won't do it just once. They might run countless simulations for research, entertainment, or purposes we cannot imagine. If that's the case, the number of simulated worlds could vastly outnumber real ones, meaning that statistically the odds of us existing in the original physical reality could be extremely small. If you take this seriously, it offers a dramatically different interpretation of the extinction and renewal cycles we've observed throughout Earth's history. In a simulation, those could be programmed events amidst large-scale environmental resets triggered by code designed to test how inhabitants respond to sudden change. Each extinction event could resemble hitting a reset switch on part of the simulation, clearing out certain parameters and introducing new variables to observe outcomes. From the designer's perspective, this would provide a controlled method for studying adaptability over vast stretches of simulated time. The simulation hypothesis also offers explanations for some of our universe's stranger aspects. Consider how physical constants seem fine-tuned for life. In physics, the values of certain fundamental properties like gravity's strength or the electron's mass appear oddly precise. If they were even slightly different, life as we understand it wouldn't exist. In a simulation, this wouldn't have to be coincidence. Those constants could be deliberately set by programmers, just as game designers establish rules for their virtual worlds. It also raises questions about our reality's apparent limits. In computing, processing power is finite, so simulations often optimize resources by rendering only what's necessary at any given moment. If the universe we experience operates similarly, there could be limits to what's actually rendered in full detail. For instance, the world beyond our direct observation might exist only as data until needed. Some physicists have speculated that certain unexplained phenomena in quantum mechanics, like the observer effect, could hint at underlying computational structure, as if the universe updates only when observed. Then there's the matter of glitches. In our technology, no system is perfect. Even highly advanced simulations could have small errors moments when the environment doesn't behave exactly as intended. In human life, strange coincidences, seemingly impossible patterns or sudden probability changes could be interpreted as these glitches, brief glimpses of underlying code showing through. Most people dismiss such moments as chance, but within a simulation framework they take on different significance. Of course, if we exist in a simulation, the natural next question involves purpose. The objectives could be as varied as the possible designers. If it's an advanced alien civilization, perhaps they're studying intelligent life development under different conditions. If it's future humans, maybe they're running simulations of their own history to understand it better or test scenarios before making decisions in their own timeline. It's even possible the simulation serves as entertainment to mission an elaborate form of storytelling or immersive experience for beings who find our struggles and triumphs worth observing. The concept also reframes the possibility of testing. In a physical world, the test might be metaphorical for life's challenges. In a simulation, it could be literal. Programmers could have constructed the environment with specific conditions and objectives for measuring behavior. The cycles of extinction and renewal could be part of those objectives, as could the moral, social, and technological challenges we face. This perspective makes every aspect of existence potentially significant data. Your personal relationships, career choices, responses to crisis, creative expressions, all of it could be contributing to some vast database of information about human behavior and potential. The simulation hypothesis doesn't necessarily make life less meaningful, but it does suggest that meaning might be different than we assume. Instead of struggling for survival in an indifferent universe, we might be participants in a designed experience with specific purposes. Whether those purposes align with our own values, whether the designers care about our well-being, whether we have any agency within their system, these become the crucial questions that determine how to live within this framework. If we are simulated beings, then the choices we make, the societies we build, the problems we solve or fail to solve, all become data points in an experiment whose ultimate goals we can only guess at. Each decision we execute, whether personal or collective, might be recorded and scrutinized continuously through systems beyond our awareness. This presents a disturbing reality within a digital construct. Overseers possess capabilities to modify circumstances instantaneously, adjusting variables to study our reactions. Such modifications could range from subtle influence over isolated incidents to massive alterations in atmospheric conditions, resource distribution, or governmental structures. From our vantage point, these would manifest as organic occurrences or human-driven changes. From their position, these represent calculated adjustments to our surroundings. However, if this proves accurate, there exists an odd form of security within it. In typical digital environments, simulated entities cannot perish in any absolute way. Their awareness forms integral components of the programming. When the system halts or undergoes modification, it can be preserved, duplicated, or migrated elsewhere. This doesn't diminish the authenticity of our internal experience, yet it introduces concepts that termination might not signify conclusion from the architect's viewpoint. Nevertheless, the digital reality theory generates more mysteries than solutions. If architects can construct existence this intricate, why expose it whatsoever? Why not maintain absolute continuity without the slightest indication of manufactured origin? One explanation suggests that discovering this truth constitutes part of the assessment. In an environment where reality remains concealed yet detectable, those who examine sufficiently might eventually recognize indicators pointing beyond apparent reality. This recognition process could represent what's actually being evaluated. Another inquiry involves whether we might escape the digital framework, not merely expire within it, but genuinely transition to whatever exists beyond. Theoretically, if our awareness consists purely of information, it could be relocated to alternative systems or embodied in physical forms within separate realities. Yet whether architects would permit such transitions remains completely uncertain. If observation drives their purpose, they might maintain barriers absolutely sealed. If training or development motivates them, graduation might eventually mean advancement to different existence levels. Currently, we remain enclosed, seeking evidence. Such evidence, if present, could emerge anywhere mark us within historical configurations in physical constants precision during moments feeling excessively coordinated or bizarre to represent chance. Each constitutes a potential fracture in the facade, beckoning deeper investigation. Whether we discover verification might depend on whether confirmation forms part of their blueprint, or whether ambiguity represents the fundamental objective. If ambiguity drives everything, then the digital reality concept might not require resolution, but rather provides perspective for viewing existence. A method to perceive the assessment as something occurring not merely on our planet, but within an environment whose limits we cannot currently comprehend. The mass disappearances, regeneration patterns, anguish, collaboration, and disputes of human development all might represent code segments still executing, still undergoing analysis. This generates the subsequent inquiry. If everything operates purposefully, what precisely defines the assessment's boundaries? And crucially, what results do the architects anticipate? If the digital construct theory contains validity, or even dismissing it while considering our planet as some form of evaluation, then perhaps the most disturbing element involves our ignorance of what's being assessed. Sitting for examinations becomes manageable when you understand the topic and structure. Realizing you might undergo daily testing without knowledge of inquiries, grading methods, or success standards completely transforms the experience. This possibility revolutionizes perception of routine existence, because suddenly everything becomes questionable. Every choice, every encounter, every urge you pursue or suppress on any element could participate in an assessment you remain oblivious to. The most successful evaluations in research environments often involve participants unaware of their involvement. Behavioral scientists have employed this methodology for generations. When subjects learn exactly what requires measurement, they modify their conduct, deliberately or subconsciously, attempting to satisfy anticipated requirements. Yet when they believe they're engaging in ordinary activities, completing unrelated questionnaires, performing neutral assignments, their authentic responses surface. If our world functions as an assessment, identical principles might operate on global dimensions. The exclusive method to observe our genuine character involves making evaluation imperceptible. This means authentic inquiries might not appear in predictable locations. They might conceal themselves within daily routines. How you address someone when anticipating no benefits, whether you assist unknown individuals when unobserved, your behavior when wielding authority over others, and when they control you. These instances could equivalent brief response inquiries distributed throughout each day, each contributing to broader configurations. The troubling aspect involves pattern authenticity being impossible to maintain indefinitely. Even recognizing observation in abstract ways, behavioral specifics eventually expose your genuine priorities. Do you demonstrate fairness exclusively when compensated? Do you discard values under pressure? Do you maintain reliability despite personal costs? Within concealed assessments, these configurations might outweigh sporadic significant decisions. Individual testing isn't the only possibility. Complete societies might undergo invisible evaluations. Community responses to shortages could represent one inquiry. Whether countries maintain principles when inconvenient could constitute another. Worldwide collaboration confronting mutual dangers could be large-scale versions of identical concepts. From external observers' perspectives, monitoring these developments without declaring consequences would expose significantly more about our authentic character than direct questioning. The difficulty emerges from unknown inquiries, meaning unknown response parameters. Choices feeling insignificant could generate extensive implications within the assessment's framework. Disregarding distressed individuals might receive different weighting during prosperous periods versus emergency times. Selecting cooperation might gain varying values depending on personal dangers involved. Identical actions could receive contrasting interpretations based on circumstances, and we'd possess no methods for determining which applies. Additionally, some inquiries might integrate into extended scenarios, types requiring decades or centuries for completion. Civilizational environmental strategies might assess prediction abilities and accountability. Results wouldn't manifest until outcomes materialized, and by then most decision creators would have departed. In such arrangements, genuine assessment subjects aren't individuals creating choices, but our entire species. Considering this perspective, even routine existence aspects could participate in the blueprint. Financial structures might assess equity and avarice. Judicial frameworks might assess fairness and adaptability. Innovation might assess intelligence and moderation. These wouldn't represent byproducts, as they'd constitute integrated conditions resembling sections within comprehensive examinations, each measuring distinct capabilities. We might navigate through them without recognition, interpreting them as standard living when actually they represent intentional obstacles. This perspective also transforms our understanding of history's pivotal moments, conflicts, uprisings, scientific discoveries. What if these weren't merely random results of human aspiration and mistakes, but checkpoints in an extended series of evaluations? Each could be engineered to observe how we manage power transitions, knowledge acquisition, or systematic disruptions. Success and failure might not even be gauged using standards we comprehend. From external viewpoints, both outcomes could provide valuable insights into how our species operates. One particularly troubling implication suggests that if the assessment remains concealed, no guarantee exists that the standards align with our moral framework. We might believe we're performing admirably by our own measures, demonstrating compassion, maintaining diligence, safeguarding those we cherish, yet still be unsuccessful according to some invisible benchmark. Perhaps the evaluation prioritizes flexibility over compassion. Maybe it values species-wide survival above individual accomplishment. Without access to the solution guide, we're proceeding blindly, hoping our intuitions correspond with the intended goals. Nevertheless, this might constitute the entire objective. A concealed assessment measures not only our actions when we understand the parameters, but our behavior when we don't. Do we maintain personal principles even without confirmation they're correct? Do we modify our conduct responding to evolving circumstances, or remain inflexible and predictable? Within such an environment, the absence of feedback isn't a defecto, it's integral to the design. The ambiguity compels us to expose what matters most deeply because we cannot customize our actions to match the evaluation criteria. This also clarifies why, if observers exist, they might permit such apparent randomness. Environmental catastrophes, unexpected possibilities, inexplicable fortune or misfortune, OL could represent methods for introducing variables without indicating their intentional nature. The more unpredictable the environment becomes, the more difficult it becomes to fabricate responses. Genuine priorities surface when plans crumble and control disappears. Taking this seriously complicates the concept of success or failure. In conventional examinations, outcomes are definitive niche, you either satisfy requirements or you don't. In concealed, continuous assessment, the outcome might involve accumulation niche, the combination of countless minor decisions over time. No isolated action determines it, but collectively they create a portrait of who we are individually and as groups. The result might not even be binary. It could represent a continuum where different types of success lead to varying consequences. Furthermore, the assessment might not conclude simultaneously for everyone. Individuals could be evaluated out of the system upon death, while our species continues under observation. Information from countless individual existences could be utilized to shape the assessment's next phase, modifying conditions to guide the group toward new directions. This would mean the evaluation remains both continuous and adaptive, lacking fixed endpoints until architects determine its conclusion. From this perspective, the uncertainty we experience daily might say the sense that we lack complete answers that stops being an irritating flaw of existence and begins resembling an intentional characteristic. If we knew precisely what was being tested, we could manipulate the system. Without such knowledge, we must navigate using our own ethical compass, reasoning abilities and capacities for understanding and planning ahead. Whether these represent appropriate tools remains known only to the designers. It also creates possibilities that some among us might approach truth more closely than others. Certain individuals might detect patterns, establish connections, or recognize that specific scenarios feel too coordinated to represent chance. They might begin suspecting structure exists beneath surface appearances, even without clear vision. Within the assessment context, these people could be those the observers find most fascinating, not because they possess answers, but because they're formulating appropriate questions. This brings us to the genuine challenge of existing within an assessment you're unaware of taking. It compels you to accept ambiguity. Every choice might matter, but you cannot verify which ones do. Every moment could constitute a question, but you never see it written explicitly. You must decide how to act without certainty. Ultimately, this might represent the purest evaluation possible. If accurate, then the authentic mystery isn't whether we're being tested, but what the subsequent stage might resemble. If unseen examiners are gathering responses, eventually they'll determine it's time to advance us forward. The only uncertainty is whether we'll recognize it when it occurs, or whether it will appear like just another aspect of routine existence. If the assessments remain hidden, then the next inquiry almost poses itself: how much of our behavior actually remains under our control? Free will stands at the core of the concept that life can be evaluated. If we don't choose our actions, then it becomes difficult to claim our responses carry meaning. Yet the more you contemplate it, the more complex it becomes to distinguish between choices we actively make and conditions that influence them. The standard assumption holds that we act from our own desires, thoughts, and logic. But so much of what we do gets influenced by factors we didn't select: the physical form we're born with, the era and location we inhabit, the family that nurtures us, the culture that envelops us. These elements shape our instincts before we even become aware they exist. They establish the foundation for every decision, limiting or expanding the possibilities we perceive as available. If our planet functions as an assessment, then free will might not represent an absolute condition. It could resemble more of a range, with each person's choice parameters defined by circumstances they had no influence over. This creates problems for the concept of equitable evaluation. If one person enters life with security and prosperity while another faces poverty and danger, can their actions truly be compared using identical standards? The watchers, if they exist, would need to account for this disparity. They might measure us not against some universal benchmark, but against what we could reasonably accomplish within our particular circumstances. In that framework, the assessment isn't about achieving identical outcomes, but about how effectively we navigate the specific conditions we've been given. This could mean the evaluation operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Your responses get compared not only to other humans in similar situations, but to the full spectrum of possibilities your circumstances allowed. Someone born into privilege might be held to different standards than someone facing constant hardship. The watchers might be less interested in absolute moral achievement and more focused on relative progress. How much growth, adaptation, and positive impact you managed given your starting point. This interpretation makes the hidden assessment even more sophisticated. It's not just measuring our choices, but weighing them against the constraints and opportunities that shaped them. The ultimate question becomes not whether you made perfect decisions, but whether you made the best decisions possible within your unique set of circumstances. If true, this suggests the evaluation process is far more nuanced and fair than simple right or wrong judgments. It recognizes that true free will operates within the boundaries of our given conditions and measures us accordingly. This also creates the possibility that part of the assessment involves whether we can broaden our own decision-making capacity. Humans possess the uncommon ability to examine our instincts and sometimes override them. We can recognize when our cultural conditioning has created biased perspectives, or when our anxieties are driving us toward poor choices. We can absorb lessons from experiences that don't just impact our own existence, but also prepare us to respond differently in future situations. From external observation, the measurement might not focus on which initial choice we make, but on whether we're capable of modifying our decisions as we develop. But then another dimension emerges. What if free will itself represents an illusion, at least in its purest form? Neuroscience has demonstrated that the brain can begin preparing for action milliseconds before we consciously decide to take it. Some experiments suggest that what we consider conscious decision-making might actually be more like after-the-fact rationalization, the brain acting first and the mind constructing explanations afterward about why we behave that way. If accurate, then the entire structure of moral accountability becomes more difficult to establish. If the watchers exist and maintain control over the simulation, or even just over the testing conditions, they could influence our choices in ways we'd never identify. Minor modifications to our environment, the order of daily events, or even our emotional condition could guide us toward one outcome or another. This wouldn't need to be obvious. In human psychological studies, tiny alterations in presentation or timing can produce massive effects on decisions. Within a controlled environment like this, the possibilities for subtle manipulation are limitless. Yet even with those limitations, people still astonish each other. Acts of unexpected compassion or brutality, sudden explosions of innovation or devastation, moments when someone contradicts all predictions. These are the instances where free will might be most apparent if it exists at all. If the assessment is designed to measure anything, it might be searching for those deviations, the times when someone steps beyond what the system could have reasonably anticipated from them. There's also the question of how much free will matters to the test's purpose. If the objective is observing our reactions to certain conditions, then predictability might not be a defect, it might be the information itself. In that sense, the illusion of free will could be sufficient as long as we believe we're acting independently. From our perspective, that belief would still influence how we approach problems and relationships, which in turn shapes the observable outcomes. But for us within the system, believing in free will has consequences beyond testing. It supports our sense of accountability, our legal systems, and our ethical frameworks. Without it, punishment and reward become harder to validate. If nobody is genuinely responsible for their actions, then concepts like justice or even moral development start losing their significance. So even if the designers understood that free will was restricted or non-existent, they might still want us to believe in it. That belief keeps our social structures operational and keeps us invested in the challenges we encounter. The real complexity might be that free will isn't simply something we either possess or lack. It could be another variable in the test itself. Perhaps part of the experiment involves seeing whether we can recognize the constraints on our freedom and work to expand them. This could apply on both individual and collective dimensions. On the individual level, that might mean resisting harmful impulses, overcoming prejudices, or developing new behaviors. On the collective level, it could mean reforming laws, dismantling inequitable systems, or creating opportunities for more people to have meaningful choices in their lives. That framework would make sense of much of what we observe in history. The extended struggles for civil rights, the debates over personal autonomy, the conflicts between authority and individual expression. Each could be a test section focused specifically on our relationship with choice and control. The outcomes wouldn't just measure what we do, but how much we fight to preserve or expand the ability to choose in the first place. If this is part of the assessment, the observers might be looking for patterns over extended time periods. Do we tend towards systems that restrict choice for the sake of order, or toward ones that expand it at the risk of disorder? Do we use freedom to create stability, or to destabilize what already exists? The answers might reveal as much about us as a species as they do about any individual within it. What complicates all of this is that freedom isn't always comfortable. With more choices comes more responsibility and more potential for regret. Some people prefer strict rules and clear authority because it simplifies the mental burden of decision-making. Others see excessive freedom as dangerous, opening the door to actions that harm the community. The tension between these perspectives might itself be something the test is designed to provoke, watching how we balance individual autonomy against collective security. Then there's the possibility that free will is conditional, something that can be earned or expanded through certain actions. In that model, the test isn't static, but dynamic. The more we demonstrate the ability to use choice wisely, the more choices we're given. The less we do, the more constrained our environment becomes. From the inside, these changes might look like fortune, privilege, or unfair disadvantages. From the outside, they'd be deliberate adjustments to see how we respond to different levels of control. If that's true, then even our perception of freedom could be part of the evaluation. Feeling trapped might push some toward despair and others toward rebellion. Feeling free might lead some to gratitude and others to complacency. The variety of responses could be the point of a proto way to see the full range of what this species does when given or denied the ability to shape its own path. Ultimately, whether free will is absolute, partial, or an illusion might matter less to the test than how we act within whatever range we do have. If we believe we have choices, we act as though we're responsible for them. If we discover limits, we decide whether to accept them or try to break through. Either way, those decisions, real or perceived matters, become the data that tells the watchers who we are. This brings us to a more personal angle on the test. If choice is central, then what we value when making those choices becomes even more important. The question isn't just what we can do, but what we will do and why. Which means the next place to look is at the moral variable malnasan, the shifting standards of right and wrong that guide us through a world where the test's rules remain hidden. If there's an assessment underway, and if the watchers want to keep it concealed while still giving us enough information to act, the most natural place to embed clues might be in the environment itself. Not as obvious announcements or clear instructions, but as patterns, anomalies, and moments that make us pause and wonder whether we're seeing the edges of something larger. The sky and the earth have always been our oldest sources of meaning. They were the first things we gazed at before we had writing, before we had nations, before we even had language to compare observations. And they still have the power to feel like messages, whether we interpret them as coincidence, myth, or something deliberately placed. The timing could indeed be intentional, synchronizing uncommon celestial phenomena with crucial human moments. That's the type of correlation that's simple to dismiss as chance until you begin recognizing a configuration. It's not exclusively the extraordinary events that carry significance. Even the predictable celestial patterns, lunar phases, the gradual stellar progression through seasons pulse could be structural elements. For ancient civilizations, these cycles were vital for survival, indicating when to plant or harvest, when to prepare for migrations or weather transitions. From this perspective, the heavens served as our original instruction guide, these one that didn't communicate through language, but through recurring forms and timing. If our planet functions as a testing ground, then teaching us to interpret those patterns might have been the initial phase, developing our capacity to observe and anticipate. The Earth itself presents its own collection of indicators. Like the sky, they can be as spectacular as volcanic eruptions or as gradual as climate shift is spanning centuries. Natural catastrophes are typically viewed as purely destructive, but they also reveal how effectively we can respond to sudden transformation. Floods assess cooperation and resourcefulness. Earthquakes measure preparedness and endurance. Droughts evaluate long-term planning and flexibility. Each exposes the capabilities and limitations of our constructed systems, compelling us to confront the difference between how we think the world operates and its actual behavior. From a test designer's viewpoint, the planet serves as an ideal variable producer. It can deliver challenges at various scales, minus local, regional, global, without revealing whether they're organic or introduced. If watchers wanted to increase difficulty, they could cluster disasters together or align them with political or social tension periods to observe how multiple pressures interact. The outcome would be a more complex assessment, one measuring not just how we handle individual problems, but how we manage them in combination. Then there are indicators that don't classify easily as either natural or artificial phenomena, anomalies that defy simple explanation, mysterious sounds reported from ocean depths, atmospheric lights that don't match known weather or astronomical events, sudden animal behavior shifts, sometimes preceding disasters, sometimes without apparent cause. These occurrences have been documented in folklore for centuries, and even in contemporary times they frequently generate speculation about whether we're witnessing more than we comprehend. Certainly, not every anomaly represents a message. Earth is a complex, dynamic system, and complexity invariably produces surprises. But if you're seeking evidence of testing, these anomalies acquire different meaning. They could be calibration checks, equivalent to microphone testing to ensure functionality, or theatre lighting adjustments to gauge audience reaction. From our internal perspective, they're mysteries. From external viewpoints, there could be routine maintenance. There's also the possibility that some indicators are designed to be accumulative. A single unexplained event might be easily dismissed, but a sequence spanning years or decades could function like a breadcrumb trail. The complexity is that different people would notice different breadcrumbs depending on their interests, location, and awareness. Only when sufficient observations are combined do the patterns begin emerging, and even then they might be open to multiple interpretations. It's worth remembering that humans are pattern-seeking creatures by nature. We excel at spotting connections, sometimes so effectively that we perceive them where none exist. This represents both strength and vulnerability within a hidden test context. On one hand, it allows us to assemble genuine clues. On the other, it means we can pursue false patterns indefinitely, convinced we're uncovering meaning when we're actually examining noise. A well-designed assessment could exploit this tendency, placing both authentic and misleading signs to observe who can distinguish the difference. In celestial observations, for example, some astronomical alignments occur purely by chance, while others follow predictable cycles. The challenge involves recognizing which is which, then deciding what, if anything, to do with that knowledge. On Earth, sudden environmental shifts might be part of extended natural cycles, or they might be genuine outliers. Without complete information, we're forced to act based on probabilities, intuition, and the evidence we can gather. That process itself could be part of what's being measured. The question is whether watchers, if they exist, ever intend for us to find definitive proof in these signs. Maybe the objective isn't confirming their presence, but keeping us searching. A species that's always pursuing meaning is one that continues developing tools, building knowledge, and expanding understanding boundaries. Even if we never receive clear answers, the pursuit itself transforms us. That transformation might be the actual point. But if there are signs meant to be noticed, then the most crucial factor isn't just their existence, but our readiness to interpret them. This means education, communication, and the ability to share information widely. In the modern era, technology provides us unprecedented ability to detect, record, and compare signs from across the planet in real time. This could be a turning point in the assessment, a moment when isolated observation fragments start forming a global picture. Whether that picture points to a natural, self-contained world or something designed from outside remains to be determined. What's certain is that Sky and Earth will continue providing events that challenge our assumptions, force adaptation, and spark questions about whether we're seeing nature at work or glimpsing a larger plan. If those glimpses are real, then the next question is whether they're warnings, instructions, or simply reminders that we're not as in control as we believe. From here, it's only a small step to consider that if the signs are deliberate, they might not just be about our awareness. They could be testing how we act on that awareness, whether we change behavior, cooperate more effectively, prepare better, or fall into conflict over the meaning of what we've observed. That possibility brings us directly to the question of moral variable, the shifting standards of right and wrong that shape how we respond to what the world shows us. If watchers or the system we're inside are leaving signs in sky and earth, then it's reasonable to think that noticing them isn't the exercise's end. The real evaluation might begin when we decide what to do next. That's where morality becomes central maze, not in abstract philosophical terms that fill books and classrooms, but in the lived reality of decisions that carry weight. The concept of a moral scorecard suggests there's an invisible ledger somewhere recording and interpreting every decision against whatever framework the test employs. We don't know the categories, we don't know the weighting, and we don't know the passing grade. But if it exists, then every choice might contribute toward it. In human society, scorekeeping is nothing new. We measure performance in sports, academics, job evaluations. We track personal progress in exercise routines, diets, savings accounts. When we understand the rules, these systems make sense. You can see expectations and measure improvement. But the moral scorecard of a hidden test operates differently. It's opaque, running in the background whether we believe in it or not. We must guess what it values, and those guesses are shaped by culture, upbringing, and personal experience we carry. If the test is designed by beings or intelligences outside our reality, their moral sense might not map perfectly onto ours. This also raises the question of measurement scale. The scorecard might operate individually, tracking each person separately or collectively, monitoring humanity as a unified entity. If collective, then our individual actions contribute to a shared outcome, meaning one person's choices could theoretically be balanced or overruled by another's. This could explain why moral advancement often feels irregular. Some groups progress in compassion and justice while others retreat, and the overall direction becomes a complex mixture of both tendencies. Another dimension to consider involves whether the score accumulates or weighs recent behavior more heavily. In our own systems, some scorecards reset periodically, allowing fresh beginnings, while others maintain complete performance history. If the watchers want to measure growth, they might value recent actions more significantly, treating past errors as less important when followed by improvement. Conversely, if the point is consistency, the scorecard might track lifetime choices without ever clearing the record. The concept of a moral scorecard also recontextualizes some of history's major events. Wars, famines, technological revolutions. Each could be viewed as massive moral testing sequences. Who steps forward to protect others, and who exploits chaos for personal advantage, who speaks truth in dangerous times, and who spreads deception. During crisis moments, morality isn't theoretical multi, it's practical, immediate, and often expensive. Those are the decisions that might carry greatest weight in the scoring. During peaceful periods, the evaluation might be more subtle. It could depend on whether we use comfort to help those in need, whether we tell truth when lying is easier, whether we notice and respond to suffering that isn't directly our own. These decisions might not feel dramatic in the moment, but if the scorecard values sustained behavioral patterns, they could be equally significant as high-stakes moments. Then there's the unsettling possibility that the scorecard doesn't just measure what we do, but what we choose not to do. In human law, we recognize crimes of commissions doing something harmful, in crimes of omissions failing to act, when you could have prevented harm. If the watchers think in similar terms, then inaction facing injustice or danger might count against us just as much as actively causing harm. This possibility makes the test more difficult, because it's no longer just about avoiding wrong actions. It's about seeking out and performing right ones. There's also the question of whether intention matters. Human moral systems differ on this point. Some traditions emphasize action-outcome mars. If it causes harm, it's wrong regardless of motive. Others focus on action-intent mission. If you meant well, the harm might be more forgivable. If watchers score based on outcomes, then good intentions without effective action might still count as failure. If they score based on intent, then mistakes made while trying to help could still earn passing marks. We have no way of knowing which approach applies, which means we can only act according to our own internal compass. Technology complicates this further. In the modern world, our actions' reach is far greater than at any previous time. A single decision can have planetary consequences, sometimes instantly. This means our moral score isn't limited to immediate surroundings. Posting harmful rumors online could affect people thousands of miles away, while deciding to share life-saving information could ripple across entire networks. If the scorecard exists, it might be tracking not just the act itself, but the scale and speed of its impact. If the test's purpose is measuring morality under pressure, then recent centuries have been an accelerated course. We've moved from small localized communities to a globally interconnected civilization where our choices can affect strangers we'll never meet. This shift might be deliberate, increasing moral test complexity to see whether we can extend empathy and responsibility beyond people in our immediate circle. From this perspective, the moral scorecard isn't just an abstract concept, it's a running log of how well we navigate our expanding influence scope. It doesn't wait for us to be ready, it just records what we do when confronted with chances to help, harm, or ignore. Because we can't see the results, we're left wondering whether we're trending toward passing or failing. What makes this both fascinating and frustrating is that the scorecard, if real, might not be revealed until the very end, be for individuals at death's moment, for humanity, perhaps at some future point when the test concludes. Until then, all we have is our own reflection and feedback from the world around us, which is often noisy, inconsistent, and incomplete. That uncertainty might be the real design feature. It forces us to develop morality that doesn't depend on visible rewards or punishments. It pushes us to act according to principles, even when there's no clear sign. Those principles are working measurably. In other words, the scorecard might be hidden not to trick us, but to ensure we're not simply playing to the scoreboard. If that's the case, then our moral evolution, both as individuals and as a species, is happening right now in ways we may not fully recognize. This means the next question isn't just how we're being scored, but what the purpose of that scoring really is. Is it preparation for something else? Is it a filter to see who moves on to another stage? Or is it an ongoing process with no final destination meter, a test we're meant to take endlessly, because the act of taking it is the point? If the watchers know, they haven't told us. So we keep acting, choosing, and hoping that the moral calculations we're making align, at least roughly, with the system we can't see. That hope carries us into the deeper question of what the test's end might look like, if there is one, and what happens when the results are finally in. If there's a moral scorecard, and if our actions are being tracked towards some unseen threshold, then it's natural to wonder whether there's an end point, not just the personal endpoint we all face when our lives conclude, but a collective one. A moment when the test ends for humanity as a whole. In that framework, the idea of graduation becomes both appealing and disturbing. Appealing because it suggests there's a reward or advancement waiting if we succeed. Disturbing because it also means there could be a final judgment about whether we've made it or not. In human terms, graduation is a transition. It marks one stage's completion and readiness to enter another. You move from the classroom's controlled environment into a broader, less guided space. If Earth is a test, then graduation could mean leaving this environment, physically, spiritually, or in some way we can't yet imagine, for a new phase designed for those who've met the criteria. It could be a higher level of reality, a different kind of existence, or even a role reversal where we become the observers for someone else's test. The key question is what those criteria might be. If they're moral, then graduation could depend on reaching a certain level of empathy, fairness, or cooperation. If they're intellectual, it might require achieving understanding depth about the universe and our place in it. If they're about adaptability, then we might need to demonstrate that we can handle unpredictable changes without collapsing into chaos. It could also be a combination of all these, measured not just in individuals, but in the species as a whole. That last part is important because it would mean no single person could graduate early. We'd rise or fall together. It's conceivable that graduation isn't about achieving perfection, but about reaching a minimum benchmark. In educational institutions, not every graduate departs with identical skill levels or knowledge bases. The requirement is simply being prepared enough to function in the subsequent stage. If the watchers are conducting a test, they might maintain similar standards. We don't need to be flawless, just capable of handling what comes next without destroying ourselves or others. This would accommodate imperfection, mistakes, and diversity of thought. As long as the overall trajectory moves upward, graduation remains possible. Graduation could also be more subtle than we imagine. It might not arrive with clear announcements or visible departures from Earth. It could be a shift in the test's nature itself, moving us into new challenges without informing us we've passed the first set. The graduation might be hidden just like the test, to prevent us from relaxing or becoming complacent. We might already be in its early stages without realizing it. If we think this way, some of humanity's major leaps could have been advancement stages. Language development, agriculture's emergence, the scientific revolution, the digital age, each fundamentally changed how we live, work, and think. From external perspective, these might be less about random progress and more about deliberate steps in an extended curriculum. The Watchers could be introducing new tools and challenges at key moments to observe whether we can integrate them successfully. There's also the question of whether graduation is guaranteed upon meeting criteria or whether it's a selective process. In human education, some students graduate while others repeat courses or withdraw entirely. If the test operates similarly, then not everyone might advance together. The idea of selective graduation raises ethical questions for both us and the Watchers. Would they choose only the most capable individuals or those showing greatest improvement? Would they value raw potential or proven reliability? In some traditions, this idea takes the form of ascension or enlightenment, the belief that individuals can reach awareness or purity states that lift them out of normal human conditions. In others, it's collective, framed as a future era of peace, understanding or unity that all will enter together once we're ready. The graduation model could encompass both depending on whether the test aims at personal development, collective evolution, or both simultaneously. If graduation exists, then the process of getting there might be as important as the event itself. In human terms, education isn't just about passing final exams, it's about everything you've learned and how you've changed along the way. The Watchers might care less about the moment we meet criteria, and more about how we reach them, whether through exploitation and shortcuts or through collaboration and resilience. Then there's the uncomfortable possibility that graduation might mean leaving behind those who aren't ready. This could be literal separation, or it could mean that those who don't pass simply remain in the same environment, unaware that others have moved on. From their perspective, nothing would have changed, just as first-year students don't necessarily notice when older students graduate and leave school. If the test is layered this way, then Earth might hold multiple overlapping reality stages, with different groups experiencing different versions without knowing it. This also brings up the question of what happens to those who fail. In our own systems, failure can mean repeating courses, transferring to different programs, or leaving the system entirely. The Watchers might have similar outcomes, perhaps restarting the test for certain individuals or groups, or moving them into environments better suited to their current level. If reincarnation is real, it could be a form of retesting, sending people back through different scenarios until they reach required levels. Graduation could also be a one-time event for the species. In that case, the risk is that if we fail, the opportunity might not come again. The test could end in a reset, with Earth either cleared of intelligent life or repurposed for something else. That sounds harsh, but in an experimental framework, not every trial leads to continuation. From the Watcher's perspective, failure might simply be part of data collection, useful for understanding what doesn't work. If the moral scorecard is part of preparation, then we might be closer to the threshold than we realize. Our interconnectedness, rapid information spread, and ability to address global problems collectively are all historically new. These could be the final skills we need before moving into whatever comes next. Conversely, our ongoing conflicts, inequalities, and environmental damage might be signs that we're not ready. From outside, those two trajectories, might's progress and self-destruction, could be playing out in parallel as the test's final stage. One reason we might not see graduation coming is that we're looking for the wrong kind of signal. We might expect something dramatic: accelerate chips in the sky, sudden shifts in physics laws, global messages. But if the Watchers want to keep the test pure, the transition could be quiet, almost unnoticeable. A change in how opportunities appear, sudden reduction in certain types of suffering, the disappearance of problems we've struggled with for centuries. From inside, it might look like an unlikely run of good fortune. From outside, it would be the next stage opening. If we ever do recognize it in the moment, the real challenge might be deciding how to act. Do we tell everyone? Do we try to prepare as many people as possible? Or do we focus on passing ourselves, knowing that not everyone will make it? Those questions aren't hypothetical if graduation is real. They're part of the moral test itself, asking whether we value collective success over personal advancement. If graduation's possibility is on the table, then every choice we make now might matter more than we think. The scorecard could be nearing its conclusion, and the patterns we set today might tip the outcome one way or another. If there is a moment when results are revealed, we might find ourselves facing not just the watchers, but the undeniable truth about how we've lived in the environment they created. Whether that truth comes with celebration or disappointment depends on what we do now. That thought alone is enough to make us look at the next part of the test differently. The part that might be about how we work together when the stakes are highest, and when the possibility of moving forward is within reach. If the test has graduation possibilities, then by definition it must also have failure possibilities. Unlike the graduation scenario, which is easy to imagine in hopeful, inspiring terms, the fail state is more elusive and more disturbing. Not just because it's negative, but because in the kind of test we seem to be in, failure wouldn't necessarily look like failure to those inside it. It might not be announced, might not be obvious, and might not even be recognized for what it is until long after it's happened, if at all. In human-designed systems, a fail state often means the end of the process for particular participants. In a class, it's failing the final exam. In a game, it's losing all your lives or being unable to continue. In an experiment, it's producing results that don't meet criteria. If Earth is a controlled environment, whether by higher intelligence, advanced extraterrestrials, or something even stranger, then the fail state could be any outcome that doesn't meet the test's purpose. And that purpose could be much more specific than we assume. If the test is moral, failure might mean proving ourselves incapable of reaching or sustaining certain ethical standards. If it's about adaptability, failure could mean collapsing under environmental or social pressures we were supposed to survive. If it's about cooperation, failure could mean persistent division and self-destruction, even when unity is possible. The danger is that from inside, these outcomes might feel like just another rough period in history, not the final stage of collapse. One unsettling possibility is that the fail state doesn't happen all at once. It might be slow erosion of the qualities the test is measuring, like steady decay that becomes normal over time. A gradual decrease in empathy, curiosity, willingness to collaborate. Each small decline might be easy to rationalize or overlook until one day the system reaches a point where recovery becomes impossible. From the watcher's perspective, that moment would mark the point of no return. From ours, it might appear like business as usual. There's also the question of what failure triggers. In human experiments, when test subjects fail to meet conditions, the experiment often terminates. In a simulation, that could mean shutting it down entirely. If Earth is a simulation, the fail state might literally mean the end of this reality version. The program could be erased, reset, or archived for study. We wouldn't see it coming, and from our perspective, it could happen instantly, lights out with no awareness afterward. Another option is that failure leads to reset rather than complete elimination. The test could simply restart, perhaps with different conditions to see if a new attempt produces better outcomes. If reincarnation is real, it could be part of this loop from the same individuals or consciousnesses being placed back into reconfigured environments to try again. In that sense, failure might not be final, but it could mean losing any progress we've made, both collectively and personally. That alone would be a devastating setback if the process is meant to be cumulative. Then there's the possibility that failure results in repurposing rather than ending. In agricultural terms, if a crop fails, the land isn't necessarily destroyed and it's replanted with something else. Earth could be stripped of its current intelligent life and repopulated with another species or left to evolve naturally without intervention. From the watcher's perspective, this might be no more emotional than swapping out one data set for another. From ours, it would be extinction. A more chilling possibility is that failure doesn't end the test at all, but shifts it into a different mode, not one designed to measure potential for growth, but one designed to contain, control, or exploit what remains. If the watchers have resources or data they can extract from us even in a failed state, they might keep us here, but with no chance of graduation. The environment could become more restrictive, controlled, and repetitive minds designed not to challenge us toward improvement, but to keep us functioning at the level we've already proven we can't surpass. The fail state could also be asymmetrical. Instead of the entire species failing together, some groups or individuals might pass while others fail. In that case, the failing groups could be removed, reduced, or isolated, while the passing ones move on to whatever's next. We might not even know that separation has occurred. Those who remain could simply think the others have vanished through natural causes. If reality can be altered at will from outside, this kind of selective culling could be invisible from within. One of the hardest aspects of thinking about failure in this context is that it might be based on metrics we don't value or even know about. Imagine taking a test you think is about mathematics, only to discover afterward that you were being graded on handwriting. If the watchers are measuring something we're not paying attention to, we could fail without ever realizing we were off track. That's especially concerning if the scoring criteria are tied to long-term patterns we don't monitor closely. Yet some patterns might hint at how failure would look from inside. If the test is about cooperation, the failed state could resemble permanent fragmentation of our species' myomeian-less conflict, deep mistrust, and inability to unite even facing shared threats. If it's about environmental stewardship, failure could look like irreversible ecosystem collapse, leading to a degraded, unstable planet that can't support the conditions needed for the test. If it's about adaptability, failure could be the point where we stop innovating, stop learning, and retreat into rigid self-protective systems that resist change at all costs. The watchers, if they're real, might have thresholds for each of these mytism lines we can't see but can cross without knowing it. Once crossed, the decision could be made instantly. There's no reason to believe they'd wait for us to recognize the problem before acting. They might even consider it more merciful to end the test without warning, sparing us awareness of our own failure. But there's another possibility, that failure is visible, just not in the way we expect. Instead of a sudden event, it could manifest as a world that feels increasingly small, stagnant, and hopeless. Opportunities would shrink, curiosity would fade, the sense that the future could be better would disappear. People might still live, work, and socialize, but without the spark of something larger driving them. In human terms, it would feel like drifting, but from the watcher's perspective, it would be the end of forward motions, the collapse of the experiment's purpose. If the fail state is real, then perhaps the most important thing isn't to know exactly what it looks like, but to notice when we're moving toward it. That could mean watching for signs of narrowing possibility, for loss of willingness to take risks in pursuit of progress, for replacement of hope with resignation. If those trends are visible, then the test might still be in play, and there might still be time to reverse course. Of course, the fail state might not be avoidable for everyone. If the test includes both individual and collective scoring, it's possible for some to pass while others fail, with outcomes diverging accordingly. That's where the moral scorecard ties back in. It might be that personal choices can't save the whole species, but they can save the individual from consequences of collective failure. Conversely, the reverse could be true. Even a perfect personal score might not matter if the group as a whole falls below the required threshold. From inside, this is frustrating because it means we're operating without knowing whether to focus on our own performance, the collective outcome, or both. But from a test designer's perspective, that uncertainty is part of the point. It forces us to care about both levels, master balance personal growth with collective responsibility, and to do so without guarantee that either will pay off. If failure is possible, then so is prevention. The real question is whether we can recognize the patterns in time to act. That means being honest about where we are, about the ways we're falling short, and about the fact that the stakes might be higher than they appear. Because if the test ends in failure, there may be no second chance, and if there is, it might not be one we recognize as ours. This leads directly into the next equally pressing question. If this is all real and if the test is still ongoing, then what tools do we have to improve our chances, to detect the watchers, to read the signs, and to influence the outcome before it's too late? If the possibility of failure is real, then it raises an even more subtle question. What if one of the things being measured isn't just our behavior or morality, but whether we can figure out that we're being measured at all. In other words, what if self-awareness isn't just a byproduct of the test, but one of its core requirements? This would change how we interpret almost everything. It would mean that noticing the signs, questioning the setup, and even speculating about life's purpose could be as important as the actions we take. It would mean that the very conversation about whether Earth might be a test could be part of passing it. In human-designed experiments, there's a distinction between subjects who are unaware of the experiment and those who are told in advance that they're part of one. The latter group often behaves differently, sometimes in ways that invalidate the results. That's why so many psychological studies rely on partial information or outright concealment until the experiment concludes. But there's also a more complex type of experiment where the goal is seeing if participants can discover that they're in one without being told. In that setup, the discovery itself becomes the point. If Earth is such a setup, then the watchers might be waiting to see who notices. The signs we've discussed, the improbable fine-tuning of life's conditions, the moral patterns, the cycles of challenge and renewal, might not just be parts of the test, but hints toward its existence. Noticing them would require a certain kind of awareness, the ability to step outside our immediate concerns, to think about the structure we're inside rather than just the content of our lives. This raises the possibility that the test could have multiple tiers. The first is basic survival and adaptation (CN), the level where most life operates. The second is social and moral complexity, the level where we begin to organize, cooperate, and create systems of meaning. The third and possibly final level could be meta-awareness, the recognition that we're inside a designed system. That recognition might be the gateway to the next stage, whatever it is. Self-awareness at that level isn't just about abstract speculation. It's about what you do with the realization. In human terms, if you were a subject in an experiment and you figured it out, you could react in different ways. You could try to break the experiment, you could try to play to its goals to ensure you pass, or you could engage with it more thoughtfully, using the awareness to refine your behavior while still respecting the framework. The watchers, if they're evaluating self-awareness, might be looking at which of those responses we choose, both individually and collectively. One challenge with this idea is that self-awareness isn't evenly distributed. In any group, some will see patterns sooner than others. This could create a split between those who suspect there's a test and those who think life is purely random. That split could be another part of the measurement. Do those who suspect share their insight, or do they keep it to themselves? Do they try to convince others, or do they respect the right of others to remain unaware? Each of those choices reveals something about values and priorities. It's also possible that self-awareness could be dangerous to the process if it spreads too quickly. If the point of the test is to see how we behave under the assumption that life is natural and unobserved, then widespread belief that we're being tested could alter the results. We might start behaving performatively, doing what we think the watchers want, rather than acting according to our own developed principles. In that case, the watchers might prefer that awareness emerge slowly, in pockets, rather than all at once. This fits with the idea that not everyone is meant to pass in the same way. Some might excel at the moral or adaptive aspects without ever realizing the broader framework. Others might grasp the framework, but struggle with the daily execution of the test's requirements. From the outside, both kinds of success might be valuable, just in different ways. The test could be designed to produce a range of outcomes rather than a single uniform result. The question then becomes, how does one demonstrate self-awareness without falling into the trap of artificial behavior? The answer might lie in integrating the awareness into daily life without letting it override authenticity. That means continuing to act according to your values, but with an added layer of observation, when watching not only what you do, but how it fits into the possible structure of the test. It's a delicate balance, and the ability to maintain it could be the real measure. From a historical perspective, moments of increased self-awareness have often coincided with major shifts in human civilization. The Enlightenment brought not just new knowledge, but a new way of thinking about knowledge itself. The space age forced us to see Earth as a single fragile sphere in a vast void, changing how we think about our place in the universe. The digital age has connected us in ways that make it possible to share patterns and anomalies instantly. Each of these could be steps toward collective self-awareness, milestones on a path that the watchers might be monitoring closely. Of course, there's also the possibility that we've been here before. If the test has been run multiple times, either on Earth or elsewhere, then the pattern of reaching self-awareness might be a known stage, one that comes with predictable risks and opportunities. In previous runs, perhaps civilizations reached this stage and either used it to pass or misused it and failed. If so, the watchers could be watching us now with a particular kind of interest, knowing that this is a critical turning point. Self-awareness could also change the way we interpret challenges. If you believe life is random, a disaster might feel like bad luck. If you believe it's a test, the same disaster might feel like a deliberate obstacle. That shift in interpretation could influence how we respond, whether we give up, push harder, or look for the hidden lesson. The watchers might not care which interpretation we choose, only that we make one consciously, rather than reacting purely on instinct. There's also a personal dimension to this. On an individual level, self-awareness about the possibility of a test could influence daily decisions in subtle but significant ways. It could make someone more patient in a difficult conversation, more willing to help a stranger, or more careful about the long-term consequences of a choice. These changes might not be visible on a large scale, but if enough individuals make them, the collective effect could be profound. At the same time, awareness can bring discomfort. The idea that you're being watched and evaluated, possibly without your consent, can feel intrusive or even oppressive. For some, this could lead to anxiety or resentment, a sense of being trapped in a system they didn't choose. That emotional response might itself be part of the measurement. Do we accept the structure we're in and work within it, or do we resist it and try to escape? Do we become paranoid, or do we find peace in the idea that there's a purpose behind it all? If the watchers value curiosity, then even doubt and skepticism could count as positive indicators. Blind belief might be less impressive than thoughtful questioning. The point might not be to accept the idea of the test uncritically, but to engage with it actively, made to explore its implications, challenge its assumptions, and test its boundaries. In that sense, the process of questioning could be as important as the answers we arrive at. The possibility that Earth functions as humanity's testing ground transforms everything about how we understand existence. Every choice becomes significant. Every relationship carries weight. Every challenge presents an opportunity to demonstrate qualities that might determine our species' ultimate fate. Whether we're being observed by advanced extraterrestrials, future versions of ourselves, divine intelligences, or something entirely beyond our current comprehension, the implications remain profound. We might be living inside the most elaborate examination ever conceived, where success could mean graduation to unimaginable possibilities, and failure could mean the end of everything we've built. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this possibility is that it doesn't require certainty to be meaningful. Even the chance that we're being tested changes how we might choose to live. It makes kindness more important, cooperation more essential, and consciousness more valuable. If the test is real, then every moment offers a chance to contribute to humanity's collective score. If it's not real, then contemplating it still pushes us toward behaviors and values that improve life for everyone. In the end, self-awareness as part of the examination would mean that the act of considering whether Earth is a test isn't a distraction from the test. It's one of the test's core activities. That possibility reframes speculation from idle curiosity into a meaningful contribution to whatever outcome lies ahead. And if that's true, then the very fact that we're thinking about it now could mean we've already crossed into a new phase of the process. What we do with that awareness, whether we use it to act more deliberately, to connect more deeply, or to prepare for possibilities we can't yet define, might be the next thing the watchers are waiting to see. The test continues, and our awareness of it might be exactly what's needed to pass. And if we're already in that stage, then the next logical step involves considering how being observed, whether we're aware of it or not, transforms the way we navigate through existence. If self-awareness represents an examination phase, then one of the subsequent questions becomes how that awareness interacts with the reality that we may be under observation. Observation fundamentally alters everything. In science, this is formally recognized as the observer effect, the concept that measuring a system changes the system itself. In physics, the most famous example is the double-slit experiment, where the act of watching particles modifies their behavior patterns. In human conduct, this principle holds equally true. People behave differently when they know they're being monitored. Sometimes the changes are subtle, sometimes dramatic. That shift can work in both directions. For some individuals, being observed enhances performance. They maintain better posture, select words more carefully, and adhere to rules more strictly. For others, it creates pressure that leads to errors or rebellious responses. In either case, the observer's presence becomes part of the environment, influencing outcomes. If the watchers conducting Earth's test understand this principle, they might have designed the observation system to be neither completely hidden nor completely obvious, not just enough for us to suspect without being certain. Uncertainty possesses remarkable power. If you know for certain you're being watched, your behavior might become calculated, even artificial. If you know for certain you're not being watched, you might relax in ways that reveal different aspects of your character. But if you're uncertain, you exist in a constant state of quiet calibration. Every action carries the question, what if this is being witnessed? That mental state could be exactly what the test is designed to produce, because it forces you to choose between acting from principle and acting for appearance. In our own systems, we observe versions of this everywhere. Security cameras in public spaces reduce certain crimes, not necessarily because they catch offenders in action, but because the possibility of being recorded alters decision-making. Performance reviews at work, teacher evaluations in schools, even the presence of a parent or friend in the room on Sol, change behavior in ways that may not match what happens when no one is watching. The watchers, if they exist, would likely understand this and exploit it, using observation as both a measurement tool and a variable in the test itself. It's worth noting that observation doesn't always come from above. Humans watch each other constantly, and this peer-level surveillance represents one of our most effective behavioral regulators. Social norms, reputations, and the desire for approval keep many people in line without formal enforcement. The watchers might count on this, knowing that even without direct interference, our awareness of being seen by each other will influence our moral and practical decisions. In that sense, they could establish the environment, release us into it, and let us police ourselves while they observe from a distance. But if the point is measuring authenticity, then observation creates a problem. It becomes difficult to determine whether someone's actions are genuine or just performance. The solution might be selective observation. If the watchers can see everything, they can choose when to reveal their presence and when to remain hidden. In moments when they want to observe natural behavior, they might ensure we feel unwatched. In moments when they want to see how we perform under scrutiny, they might make us subtly aware through signs, symbols, or anomalies that trigger a sense of being monitored. It's possible that some of those moments have already occurred in your life. Times when you've suddenly felt the hairs on your neck rise or sensed you were being observed without visible evidence. Times when a coincidence felt too precise, as if it were placed there to see how you'd react. In a purely random world, those are just quirks of perception. In a test environment, they could be moments when the watchers lean in to take a closer look. If that's accurate, then the observer effect isn't just a side phenomenon, it's an active tool in shaping and measuring us, and it might not always push us toward the same kinds of choices. Sometimes knowing you're being watched encourages pro-social behavior, kindness, generosity, honesty. Other times, it provokes defensiveness, secrecy, or defiance. The watchers might be less interested in whether observation improves or worsens behavior, and more interested in which direction different people lean. The ratio between those responses could be one of the key statistics they're tracking. We should also consider that observation might not always focus on the present. If the watchers can see our history, not just what we're doing now, but everything we've ever done, then the observer effect could extend backwards. The knowledge that actions leave permanent records can shape decisions even when no one is visibly paying attention. Humans do this with laws and archives. The watchers could do it with something far more precise, the perfect memory of every moment in the test. In that case, the scorecard we discussed earlier wouldn't be an abstraction. It would be a literal record, impossible to erase or alter. There's strange comfort and discomfort in that idea. On one hand, it means nothing is truly lost. Every good act, every effort, Every moment of courage is preserved, even if it went unnoticed by other humans. On the other hand, it means every mistake, every lapse, every selfish choice is also there, recorded without the possibility of forgetting. Whether that feels inspiring or oppressive might reveal something about how we'd respond if we knew for certain we were being observed in this way. Observation could also be layered. Perhaps the watchers aren't the only observers. There could be multiple groups, higher intelligences, different civilizations, even future versions of ourselves, each with their own reasons for watching. Some might be interested in morality, others in technology, others in resilience. This overlapping observation could create a complex set of influences, each affecting the test in subtle ways. From our perspective, it would just feel like life, with its mix of coincidences, challenges, and moments of unexplained clarity. If the observer effect is built into the test, then it might explain certain patterns in human behavior that otherwise seem puzzling. Why do people sometimes behave better in public than in private? Why do revolutions in behavior often happen in times of increased communication and visibility? Why do we put so much effort into storytelling, art, and record keeping, even when survival is at stake? Perhaps on some deep level, we've evolved with the assumption that we are seen not just by each other, but by something larger. This assumption could also be one of the watcher's tools for measurement. If they've designed the test well, then the question of whether we're observed becomes less important than how we act, under the belief that we might be. That belief shapes cultures, religions, laws, and personal ethics. It creates systems of accountability that persist even when no physical watcher is present, and in doing so, it reveals the balance between our internal and external motivations. The observer effect in a test environment might also work in reverse. Sometimes the watchers might want to see what happens when observation is removed. What do people do when they believe they're truly alone, with no witnesses and no consequences? Those moments can be revealing not because they show our best selves, but because they strip away performance and expose what remains underneath. In that regard, the absence of observation could be equally valuable data as its presence. It's conceivable that the watchers cycle between these approaches, periods of visible or suspected monitoring, alternating with periods of complete invisibility. This would enable them to compare our conduct under different circumstances, developing a more comprehensive understanding of our character. The transitions between these approaches might be signaled by events that seem random to us, sudden surges of attention on certain topics followed by extended periods of neglect. From their viewpoint, these could be intentional experimental cycles. If all of this holds true, then the observer effect isn't merely a quirk of human psychology, it's a fundamental component of the environment we inhabit. It influences our culture, decisions, and self-perception, even when we're not consciously recognizing it. It operates as a silent force directing us toward different behaviors depending on circumstances. And if the watchers have been conducting this for an extended period, they might be able to predict our reactions with disturbing precision simply by modifying the level and type of observation. This leads to another possibility, that observation isn't solely about watching us, but about training us to monitor ourselves. Over time, we may internalize the observer's presence to the point where we no longer require them. We become our own observer, our own evaluator, our own guide. If that's part of the assessment, then the ultimate objective might be for us to live as if we're always observed, might because we fear judgment, but because we've learned to hold ourselves to standards we believe are correct. And if we ever reach that point, it could be the moment when the watchers withdraw entirely, knowing the assessment has served its purpose. Not because they've stopped caring, but because we've learned to carry observation's essence within ourselves. That possibility alone might be the bridge into the assessment's next part, the one where it no longer matters whether someone is watching, because the decisions we make come from a place that no observer, however powerful, can modify. Whether or not this really represents an assessment, the thought transforms the way you navigate life. It's one of those concepts that's difficult to ignore once you've seriously considered it. It penetrates beneath the surface of daily decisions. The way you address someone who can't assist you, the effort you invest in a task no one is monitoring, your reaction to a small moment of injustice. Even if no watcher exists, imagining one changes your internal orientation toward the world. Some people already live this way, without calling it an assessment. They operate by principles that assume their actions matter beyond the immediate consequences. For them, the concept of being evaluated isn't tied to a supernatural figure, hidden observer, or cosmic purpose. It's a commitment to their own standards. Whether they believe in karma, fate, divine judgment, or nothing at all, they act as if their behavior ripples outward in ways that can't be fully measured in the moment. If the assessment is real, those people might be the ones scoring highest without even attempting to play the game. If it's not real, they've still constructed lives with meaning, purpose, and integrity, which are rewards in themselves. This represents one of the strange comforts of the idea. If you act as if you're in an assessment, the benefits emerge whether or not the assessment exists. You either pass something cosmic you can't prove, or you leave behind a trail of actions that enhance others' lives. In either case, you lose nothing by behaving as though it matters. But there's also tension in it. The belief that life might be an assessment can sharpen focus and responsibility, but it can also generate anxiety. For some, it feels motivating to imagine they're accountable to something greater than themselves. For others, it feels like a burden bottom knee. The pressure of constant evaluation, the fear of making wrong moves in a game they didn't sign up to play. This mix of feelings might be part of why the assessment theory isn't more widely embraced. It offers comfort to some and discomfort to others, often in equal measure. The way this concept lands often depends on personal experience. Someone who's faced injustice might resist the thought of an assessment because it implies someone set the obstacles on purpose. Someone who's overcome incredible odds might find reassurance in it, as if their struggle had meaning beyond survival. In either case, the idea functions like a lens. It doesn't change life's facts, but it changes how those facts are interpreted. If the assessment isn't real, that doesn't make the lens useless. Belief systems, even when unprovable, often work because of the behaviors they inspire, not because of their literal truth. A person who believes in an afterlife might be more generous on owls not because there's proof of reward, but because the belief makes generosity feel more urgent. A person who believes in fate might take risks they wouldn't otherwise take, which in turn changes their life's trajectory. In this way, what if Earth is an assessment works whether it's fact or fiction. It's the behavior it prompts that matters. We observe this in history. Societies that believe they're accountable to gods, ancestors, or future generations often create systems of ethics and cooperation that outlast the original belief. Even when belief details fade, the habits remain. A culture might no longer think its harvest depends on ritual, but it still gathers to share food and support one another because the practice has proven valuable itself. The assessment idea could work similarly. Even if future generations reject the premise, the behaviors it shaped could survive. There's also the possibility that the assessment, real or not, operates best when people don't know which it is. If you knew for certain it was real, you might focus entirely on optimizing for the score, which could lead to shallow or manipulative actions. If you knew for certain it wasn't real, you might dismiss behaviors that have value only in the long term. Uncertainty keeps both possibilities alive, allowing the behaviors to flourish without collapsing into cynicism or calculation. Even in the absence of proof, the question creates quiet accountability. Imagine waking up each day with two possible truths in mind. Either no one is watching, and the meaning you make is the only meaning that exists, or someone is watching and your choices are part of something larger. In both scenarios, your actions still shape immediate reality for yourself and the people around you. The difference is only in the ripple effect's scope. Living as if it's an assessment can also sharpen your awareness of moments that matter. It draws attention to situations that might otherwise pass unnoticed. The decision to speak up when something's wrong, to offer help when it's inconvenient, to listen when you'd rather talk. In the assessment framework, these aren't just personal victories. They're opportunities to demonstrate growth, resilience, and empathy. Whether anyone is measuring them doesn't change the fact that they add weight to the kind of person you become. One challenge is that the assessment idea can be misused. History is full of examples where belief in divine or cosmic evaluation has been used to control behavior, enforce conformity, or punish dissent. The difference between a healthy version of the belief and a harmful one often comes down to whether it encourages personal responsibility or demands blind obedience. An assessment worth passing should measure qualities that improve life for everyone involved, not just compliance with arbitrary rules. That's why even if the assessment is real, it's important to examine the source of the rules you follow. If the watchers exist, they may not care whether you follow every tradition or ritual humans have invented. They may care more about whether you've learned to think critically, to question harmful systems, and to act with integrity even when it costs you. Blind obedience might be as much a sign of failure as selfish rebellion because it suggests you've outsourced your moral judgment instead of developing it. It's also worth considering that if the assessment exists, its criteria might be simpler than we imagine. Humans have a tendency to complicate things, to create long lists of requirements, rituals, and formalities that may have nothing to do with the original goal. The real assessment might be as basic as: do you help when you can? Do you harm less than you could? And do you learn from the times you fail? If those are the measures, then the question of whether the assessment is real becomes less urgent, because those are good practices regardless. The most interesting part of the question might be its effect on perspective. When you think of life as an assessment, even temporarily, it becomes easier to see patterns that could otherwise seem random. The challenges you've faced, the people you've met, the turning points in your life in a random world, they're just events. In an assessment world, they're placements designed to measure something specific. The difference is subtle but powerful because it can shift frustration into patience and confusion into curiosity. Even if you ultimately reject the idea, the act of considering it can open up new ways of thinking about your place in the world. It can encourage you to reflect on the values you live by, to pay more attention to the impact you have, and to question whether your daily actions align with the kind of outcome you'd want if someone were keeping score. It can also remind you that many of the traits we value, patience, courage, kindness, unease, are most visible in moments that feel like assessments, whether or not they are. And perhaps that's the point. Maybe the truth about the assessment isn't meant to be known. Maybe its greatest value lies in the way it shapes our thinking and behavior, simply by being possible. In that sense, the question is less about what's out there watching us and more about what's in here guiding us. Whether the assessment is an external reality or an internal construct, the effect is the same: it nudges us toward a version of ourselves we might not reach otherwise. The final step in this line of thought is to return to the personal. Whether or not the assessment exists, you still wake up each day and choose how to move through the world. You still interact with others in ways that either build or erode trust, kindness, and cooperation. You still face moments that feel like turning points, even if they don't show up on any scoreboard. The question of the assessment doesn't remove the weight of those choices. If anything, it adds to it. And so the possibility remains, hovering just out of reach, shaping decisions without forcing them, asking without answering. That's what makes it powerful. You don't need to prove it to live as if it's true. You just need to decide whether the version of yourself who acts as though it matters is the version you want to be. Wherever you happen to be right now, might be you're at home, maybe you're at home, and maybe you're in a place you've been for years or a place you just arrived in mind. This whole thought experiment has been about something that stretches beyond location. It's not just about where you are, but about what you do with the space and time you have. Whether or not Earth really is an assessment, you're already moving through something that feels like one in its own way. And unlike most assessments, this one doesn't have a set schedule, no clear instructions at the top of the page, and no announcement that it's over. You only find out it's ended when you realize you're somewhere else entirely. The question remains open, the test continues, and your choices still matter, my sir, perhaps more than you ever imagined. Or perhaps it's midday and this has been playing in the background while you attend to other tasks, and now you discover yourself listening more intently. That's one of the characteristics of a concept like this. Midas doesn't truly depart when the words cease. It accompanies you into the remainder of your day, waiting for a peaceful moment to resurface. If it's accurate that we're within some form of examination, then every single instant you've experienced so far has been part of it. Not merely the obvious instances, the significant decisions, the dramatic occurrences, but the quiet, unremarkable ones as well. The manner you've addressed people you thought wouldn't influence your future. How you've managed irritation when no one was present to witness it. How you've treated yourself when you've committed errors. These are all entries in whatever record might exist. inscribed in the type of ink that never fades. And if it isn't an examination, if this is all simply the result of nature, chance, and the universe's peculiar rules, then none of those things cease being significant. You still must decide how to interact with others, how to respond to adversity, how to treat yourself. The difference lies only in the framework, and framework alters how we bear the burden. An examination provides it with structure, but even without structure, the burden remains mandated. It's simply less organized. That's why the concept functions as a lens, even for those who don't accept it literally. If you choose to view through it, you'll begin perceiving things differently. You'll notice configurations and events that previously felt random. You'll start considering whether challenges serve a purpose. You'll find yourself wondering if certain moments are designed to reveal something about yourself, whether or not there's higher intelligence behind it. The perspective shift changes your relationship with the world. Sometimes it's appealing to envision the examination, if it exists, as something magnificent, a massive complex experiment with sophisticated technology or divine insight behind it. Other times, it's more practical to imagine it as a straightforward method of determining whether beings like us can coexist without destroying each other, whether we can construct something worth transmitting, whether we can improve in ways that make survival more than mere persistence. A magnificent examination is thrilling to contemplate, but a straightforward one is often more challenging to pass. The reality is you won't receive a score at the conclusion that you can compare to someone else's. There's no official announcement, no ceremony, no written evaluation. Whatever occurs after this phase, if anything occurs, will be influenced by everything you've accomplished and become, but you won't observe the results in the manner you're accustomed to with other types of examinations. You'll only witness the next step. By then, the part you're in now will be finished. And that's part of why it's valuable to pay attention now. If you wait for confirmation before you begin acting as if it matters, you may exhaust your time. It's like waiting to commence studying until you've seen the final exam. By then, you've already missed all the opportunities to learn in the process. If this is an examination, the examination is occurring every day, whether you believe in it or not. And perhaps the point isn't to convince you that it's real. Perhaps the point is to remind you that acting as though it's real provides you something to strive toward, something to measure yourself against that isn't about wealth, status, or survival alone. It's about the qualities that endure beyond those things, manners, the ones that, if there's anything beyond this life, might actually matter there as well. It's peculiar to think that something so enormous could be happening without most people recognizing it. But if you've been with this thought for a while now, you've already observed more than most. You've considered the possibility that life is being monitored, that your choices are part of something larger, that the details of your existence are more than just random noise. Even if you decide you don't believe it, that consideration has already transformed you in some way. And now the question becomes, what will you do with that transformation? Will you carry it into tomorrow, into next week, into the years ahead? Will you let it guide you in moments when it would be easier to look away? When doing the right thing would cost more than doing the easy thing? Will you remember it when no one is watching, or when you think no one is? If this really is an examination, then the watchers, whoever or whatever they are, will observe that answer in your actions. If it's not, then the people around you will. Either way, the outcome is shaped by the same elements. What you choose, what you build, what you leave behind. The beauty of this possibility lies not in its certainty, but in its capacity to elevate ordinary moments into something meaningful. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate growth. Every challenge becomes a chance to reveal character. Every choice becomes part of a larger narrative that extends beyond personal benefit. Whether you're walking down a crowded street or sitting alone in your room, whether you're facing a major life decision or simply deciding how to respond to someone's rudeness, you're participating in something that could be far more significant than it appears. This doesn't mean you need to live in constant anxiety about being judged. Rather, it suggests that the values you choose to embrace, kindness, courage, integrity, curiosity, have weight that extends beyond immediate consequences. Consider how this changes your relationship with failure. In a random universe, mistakes might feel like pointless suffering. In a testing environment, they become learning opportunities, chances to demonstrate resilience and the capacity for growth. The same setback that might crush someone who sees no purpose could strengthen someone who believes their response matters. Think about how it transforms your view of others. If everyone around you is also taking this examination, then their struggles aren't just personal dramas but shared challenges. Their successes aren't threats to your own score, but evidence that growth is possible. Compassion becomes not just kindness but recognition that you're all in this together. The idea also changes how you think about legacy. What you leave behind isn't just the material impact of your work, but the example you set for how to navigate existence itself. The patterns you establish, the problems you solve, the relationships you nurture, all of it becomes data about what's possible for beings like us. Whether future generations look back on our era as a time when humanity learned to cooperate on a global scale, or as the period when we failed to transcend our limitations, may depend on choices being made right now by people who may never know the full significance of their actions. So wherever you are right now, morning, evening, a busy street, a quiet room, you're still in it. The time is still running. The next moment is still yours to shape. And whether there's an end score waiting for you or not, you still get to decide how you want to be remembered and what kind of mark you'll leave on the place you've been given. That's the kind of question that keeps unfolding long after the conversation ends. And if you found it worth thinking about, then you already know the next part is yours to write. The examination continues. Whether you call it that or not, your choices still matter. Your actions still ripple outward in ways you may never fully understand. And somewhere, somehow, someone or something may indeed be watching, taking notes, and hoping you'll choose to be the best version of yourself that's possible. The question remains open, the test continues, and your response to both is still being written.